where all these problems are coming from, be very familiar with how the system works, be very confident, be able to go look into private records and files, and file under the freedom of information, intervene in their conferences, hire people who will go infiltrate and figure out what's going on. All of that I did since the 90s. But one of the major events, before I say that, let me tell you what I'd like to cover overall in this. I want to cover a bit of the history, which I will just talk about, of how this book came about. I want to discuss what I faced when the book came out and how the book has made an impact over time. But I'd like to hear other people's views who've been part of the story. How the Hindu community, the Indian community has responded, and where we're falling short. I also want to talk about the state of the Kurukshetra today. And when I talk about the state of the Kurukshetra today, it includes both a discussion on the other side, how they become stronger, what they're up to, and also a discussion on our side. I feel that our meetings and gatherings do not do enough self-critique. We don't do enough self-critique. We like to either pat our back, feel good. The feel-good drug addiction is very strong. Everybody wants to feel good, either by saying how great we are or by knocking down the other side without really understanding the depth and magnitude of their accomplishments. So I think this self-critique is lacking, and I want to do a bit of that. And then I'll talk about what are some of the projects that Infinity Foundation has going forward. So with that kind of a plan of my talk today, let me get started. So the book is the result of several episodes and interventions I came across at the American Academy of Religion. I used to go to every single year's conference for many, many years. We were donating, we were contributing to the Academy, the American Academy. We had funded Columbia University, University of California, Harvard University, all these kind of places, spent a huge amount of money. And so I was very hands-on in terms of engaging them, looking at all the dissertations that came out, going to all their conferences and their events. And whether I was on a panel or sitting in the audience, I would raise my hand and interact a lot. And, they started finding that I'm a bit of an anomaly. First, there was nobody else funding India and Hinduism. Nobody else, with the exception of SP Hinduja from in Geneva. He had a few programs, but nobody else, none of these things that we now have existed at that time, engaging the Academy. It was pretty much abandoned. Nobody really cared. The views of the VHP in America and the RSS and the BJP was that, it doesn't matter. We are worried about what we are doing in mandirs, and we're doing very well. We're making a lot of money. So they were not concerned about the intellectual dimension, and in some ways actually cynical about the intellectual dimension. So this was a lone project. And I found that things were troubling. While I thought that by funding them, I could influence, but that was not the case. And I started getting deeper and deeper to analyze what is the cause of all this happening. It's not enough to know, it's not enough to compile a list of incidents. You have to go deep and figure out what's causing it, who is behind it, who is funding it, what's their agenda, what's their history. You got to do all of that. So I started doing that and giving talks in the 1990s. Then some e-groups started. There was a Yahoo groups, whole phenomenon of Yahoo groups. And we created one of the largest Yahoo groups at that time. We had a few thousand members, very, very vibrant. And then we started doing our own conferences, our own events, rather than funding the other side. And, I have to tell you very honestly that I was very disappointed with the lack of support from the Indian consulate and Indian embassy or the Indian government or culture ministry or anybody in India on the government side. I was very disappointed by the lack of support from the Sangh Parivar at that time. They were not interested. They were so inbred and patting each other on the back as, how things are going well for us in North America, but not really aware of these kind of problems. And what changed for me is something very surprising. This will surprise you. When I was attacked by my opponents, then my people started taking me seriously. Now, this is very strange. It is thanks to Wendy Doniger and her students that I became known. I mean, because they started, one fellow in Emory University called the FBI. that he thinks I'm a dangerous fellow, and he went to the academic conferences talking about me, and he got a grant to go around the US and Europe talking about the threats that he's facing, violent threats he's facing from a guy like me. And what am I doing? What are my threats? I'm writing. That's all I'm doing. I'm writing. And these writings are considered a threat by him. And Diana Eck at the American Academy of Religion, in one of the conferences, wondered why the FBI is not keeping track of certain Hindu people, like they're keeping track of some Muslims. So why not the Hindus also? And remember, she was the Harvard senior most person in Hinduism studies. And here's a person studying Hinduism as her whole career and wondering why the FBI is not targeting and investigating Hindus. So I've been through all that, and it didn't bother me. I've been through a lot of nonsense. The FBI showed up at Swami Dayanand Saraswati's ashram in Arshvidya Gurukulam in Pennsylvania, because I used to speak there a lot, and they wanted to find out what this place is all about. And, they went around asking a few questions, and they went away that, this is just an ashram, that's what it is. And then Jack Hawley started a research project at Columbia University called Hinduism Here meaning United States. And each team was supposed to, the students were put into teams. So one of somebody very close to me was a spy of mine. He was in one of those teams, and so he was always telling me what's going on. So each team was supposed to go to some dangerous Hindu and investigate. So one of them went to BAPS, one of them went to Swami Dayanand Saraswati's organization, one of them was supposed to investigate Infinity Foundation, like that. There were 3 or 4 target groups at that time. So all that happened, and then those results were presented at the American Academy of Religion, and I insisted that I want you to come and investigate us as much as you want, but on the condition that when you present the report, I'll be allowed to come and respond. So they allowed me to come, and I gave a response, and all of that is online. So this was a period of very vibrant, dynamic back and forth going on, and this is what got the Indian community and Hindu community to finally realize that there is this guy, he's doing all this fighting. So maybe there's something important. So I think, and then it was something I exposed on Ganesh, when they called Ganesh a limp phallus, and when they started insulting the goddess, and when they started insulting Sri Ramakrishna. So these things happened many years later, but when I started exposing how they are making fun of our deities and gurus, that is what got the Hindu community really upset. So it was an emotional, they pushed the emotional button. If you push the emotional buttons, our community will respond. But as long as it was a very serious intellectual analysis of the whole ecosystem, what's going on, people were not taking it too seriously. This is just something I just want to put on the table. Now, there has been a lot of progress. Obviously, we are here today. Such an event was not happening 25 years ago. There was no Nikunj. There weren't all these other kind of groups either. So now you have them organized. People are concerned that we have a problem, and there's a lot of noise being made. A lot of channels on the social media. A lot of virtual events, physical events going on, and many new icons and heroes have come up on our side. So it's a different kind of dynamics than it used to be. Now I no longer need to bother, because there's a lot of, when something happens, a lot of other people are fighting for our side. I don't need to bother. So I'm looking at the future. Where are things headed? What is going on that people are not looking at? Because the things that are already well known, the problems that are already well known, we have a whole lot of our own people who are concerned about it, such as the 1,100 people who registered here. But all is not well. I do want to discuss some of the issues. Let me see my time. Okay, I have time. So one of the main issues I see is, I have asked the question, where are the Pandavas? Where are the Pandavas today? I mean, you need to have people who are well trained. They need to have a whole lot of subject matter expertise. They need to have the debating skills. They need to know about the other side, how to bring them down. They need to work together. They need the support of bigger mechanisms. And this should not be once in a while when there's a problem that some Pandava comes up and fixes, fights back. This has to be an ongoing thing. We need a home team. A home team would be something which is permanent. Many of them have to be paid. We have our share of such people in India and in the United States who are paid. We also have people that are a lot of volunteers that do this work for us, but we need more. We are outgunned, outmanned, outfunded by our opponents. That's true. Opponents on the left-wing side, opponents on the Christian missionary side, opponents on the Islamic side, all kind of opponents. So we certainly have, while we are better off than we were, it's still running quite short of where we need to be. The recent last year there was this dismantling Hindutva conference, and let me tell you the good part and the bad part. That's like 15-20 years after our movement started. So certainly we were able to galvanize a lot of people on our side, which is good. Thanks to Nikunj and many other people, we played our role. I had a personal discussion with the president of Rutgers University, various other places. So a lot of people came together. But there are two things that bother me from our side. One is there were multiple petitions. It was not like one petition. Some group A put up a petition, got a few hundred or a few thousand signatures, and a group B put up their own separate petition. Rather than having a team come together, draft a petition, make sure that everybody's included, there were multiple petitions. So we weren't even able to get our act together. While the other side was highly unified. They had 1,000 or more academic scholars all over the world signing up. One group, one movement, one voice, one position paper. Second issue is that when that event was over, all this energy dissipated. But do you know, 2 more events have happened since, as bad as that one and worse. Some of the events that have happened since that dismantling Hindutva conference are even worse because people in the Biden administration have become part of it. It's no longer just academic people. They were also getting the government into it. The government, this goes way back, the axis of, the nexus of government and academics and think tanks is pretty old in this country. And I'm writing on this quite a lot now, on what is the government up to. So while these things have happened from the opposing side, we haven't really responded. We are still talking about the dismantling of the conference as some kind of a historic event, but that was one out of many, and there have been other conferences since. So what happened is, this is something that my friend Kapila Vatsyanji, who is no more, elderly person, mother figure, very friendly to me, very, very close. She used to describe this. Whenever I used to go to Delhi and go to her office and I would say, what do you think of this person or that event from our side? She would say, Rajiv, ye to Diwali ka pataka hai. Diwali cracker, which means what she was saying is that the Diwali cracker blows up, makes a lot of noise, lights up the sky, but then a minute later it's gone. And there's no value long term. It makes a lot of noise short term and it's highly visible. Everybody notices it and appreciates it, but then it's gone and there's nothing afterwards. So she felt that a lot of our events and our activities are like that. It's a momentary success. It's short term, feel good. We've done something, made a huge dhamaka. And then, a few weeks later, it's all forgotten, gone, nobody cares, and so on. There is no permanent structure to combat the series of dismantling things that others are doing against us. What you need is a permanent structure with assignments, papers that have to be produced by them, research that they have to do, longitudinal studies they have to do, constructive work and deconstructive work, both constructive, like our 14-volume series on history of Indian science and technology. We need many things like that. And deconstructive, where you're going and deconstructing various ideologies, various camps, various types of universities constantly. And this is not just a reaction to something went wrong. It's not that they have attacked us, so we get our people together and fire back. That's not it. You need a permanent army. You need a standing army. You need an intellectual army that's always doing these kind of things and not just reacting. So that is a serious issue we currently have. Also, I see it's a very serious, very sad thing that the new leaders who come up are all interested in instant limelight, getting into the spotlight, becoming popular in the social media, trampling over each other. There is no, kind of a collaborativeness. I feel that a lot of people I trained that worked for us, and they were inspired by us. We have so many moving emails and messages from them, and so many videos of how much they were grateful, have decided to go off on their own. That's fine, but also some of them turned nasty. So I don't want to get into too many names, but there are, I mean, among the top video channels that you see in our space, I would say more than half of them they started out their lives, their careers in this area, working with Infinity Foundation. This is some of them in the 90s, some of them after 2000, some of them after 2010, but somewhere or other, and these are big names. They're quite well-established people now, but they don't want to come together. They each want to go off on their own. I think that's a weakness we have. So somebody should have played the role of a big umbrella. And I always propose to my friends at the RSS that they should have played the role, because they have the position, they have the capacity, they have the scale, they have the history to look after all these things. And so many little groups, there are entrepreneurial groups that want to go off on their own and do good things. Somebody needs to put them together. But I cannot tell them what they should do. Their decision is that they will only do things with their own internal people, and they have a certain way of doing things. They're doing very good work, and they don't want to expand their role and their scope to include the Dharma community in general, even those who are not part of the Sangh per se or institutionally, but who are independent operators. They don't want to expand into that. So we don't have anybody doing the World Council of Churches, where all kind of independent churches exist, but they come together, and each of them is supported by this big umbrella organization. We don't have that umbrella of organizations like Islamic people have. The Council on Islamic Education, CAIR. There are many kind of groups like that. Hindus, we don't have a group like that everybody will respect and say, okay, that's the umbrella group we all belong to, and they don't play favorites. They're going to support whoever is doing good work. This is needed. And I proposed this to the Ramakrishna Mission. I proposed it to Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. I proposed it to all the gurus. I proposed it to the Sangh people. And so far, it seems that everybody is more interested in their own success as an organization, and not taken on the big thing. So I also find that, when somebody's in trouble, when I've been in trouble, hardly anybody would come to my help. This is true. I call this the wounded warrior syndrome. In the military, you never leave a wounded warrior behind. If you are a group and one of your warriors is injured, you have to stay there. If he's dead, you got to bring his body back. If he's alive, you got to help him. You cannot just ditch him, abandon him. You cannot say he's a liability. So we don't want to worry about him. Such a military would die, because if you can't look after each other, then there is no teamwork. Nobody would stick their neck out and fight if they felt that, if I'm injured, they're going to ditch me. So why should I fight? I should be risk averse and play it safe. So what we have is a lot of people who will be big heroes when they are with each other in a like-minded group. But when it's time to stick their neck out, go into enemy territory and fight it out and take the risk, many of them don't want to do that. They want to encourage someone else to do it. And when that person gets hit, they're not there to help him. They'll just ditch him because he's a liability. So I became a liability many times in the last 25, 30 years, I must say, liability to our own people, who would just then start blaming me, accusing me, making fun of me. So I'm saying all these things because I want people to understand this, to debate it, to figure out, we do need help for the wounded warrior. We need a mechanism such that if any one of us is attacked, then all of us have to come to defend him, protect him, give him some resources. Maybe he needs legal resources, financial resources, maybe he needs moral support, maybe he needs social media support. We ought to be there for each other, especially somebody who's sticking his neck out for our collective best interest. Now I will talk about individuals. Our individuals tend to be very emotional. I can do a tweet and get 50 times as many likes and retweets if I'm talking of either I'm hitting out against a well-known enemy or I'm giving some great big praise of our side, making people feel good. But if it's something, neither of these two extremes, if it is something thoughtful, if it's something analytical, if it's something, especially if I'm requiring them to read a little bit, to study a little bit, spend some time on it, hardly anybody seems interested. So we do not have good reading skills. I mean, people need to be much better read. I find that I actually have people think I only have a lot of intellectual relations and engagement with Westerners and Christians and leftists and all that. That is true, but I also have a few Muslims, and I also have a very large number of Chinese because I used to do business in China, so I've kept some contact in various ways. I find that reading skills are quite more developed among our opponents. They do read a lot. One of the reasons they read a lot is they've streamlined the scholarship. It comes from certain authorities. They respect whatever those people publish. They definitely read it. So it's not so haphazard, and it's kind of an organized, almost like a curriculum that all the activists are required to read. In our case, most people today are not even familiar with the writings I've done. I put so much effort into them. They're familiar with a video here and a video there. They don't even have attention span for 30 minutes of a video. They'll say, okay, tell me in 2 minutes. That's all I can do. So the attention span is very limited. People are very emotional. They want a feel-good injection of like a dose of a drug, right? Quickly, instant feel-good. That's kind of the state of a large part of our people. And so thanks to a catchy vocabulary, we did coin catchy terms. Some of them we coined, some of them we repurposed existing terms. Some of these terms that started getting used, like breaking India and Hindu phobia and mutual respect and atrocity literature, and we have 108 terms that we've identified. Many of these terms are repurposing old terms that were out of circulation or they had a different meaning, and we brought it into the current context, and some terms we coined. So these terms have done good work. They have, because they don't require a lot of attention span, a lot of knowledge and reading skills and so on. So a large number of people can sort of participate by using these buzzwords and become important. So that's good. At least at one level, people can participate emotionally. But we also need a larger group of people producing solid scholarship. And solid scholarship is something where you spend multiple years per book. And like the new book I'm going to come out with, I'll talk in a moment just a little bit on it. It's a result of multiple years. It'll be 500-600 pages, and it'll just change the whole discourse, the whole framework of breaking India. But I feel it's very difficult for me to find people with that kind of a commitment. Very difficult to find people who, because they would rather go from this event to that event and go to this show and go to Arnab and go to that guy and make some big noise. So all that's needed. But I want to point out the difference between activism and scholarship. There's a difference between activism and scholarship. Activism is needed, scholarship is needed, and some people can do both, but they are very distinct things. A scholar produces something which has a long life, long shelf life. It is deep research. It will withstand scrutiny, debate, argumentation, due diligence, all of that, cross-examination, and it has a life of its own. It has a long shelf life. Whereas activism, you go from one episode to another, one reaction to something to the next one, and it basically takes the ideas that the scholar has produced and sort of spins them, recycles them. So activists should be supporting the scholars, and scholars should be feeding the activists. Long ago, when Infinity Foundation was starting, I met some young people who were in medical school, and they would attend my talks at Ashvidya Gurukulam and follow me in various places I would go. And they wanted to create some kind of activist group. And so the understanding was that Infinity Foundation is a think tank. They are the activists. They will go to Washington, start an activist group and work with Congress and all that kind of stuff. And they launched that activist group, and it is called the Hindu American Foundation. But within a year or two, Harvard's Diana Eck convinced them to break up their relations with Infinity Foundation, because Harvard would then be helping them if they were not aligned with me. And they took that bait and they disconnected with me, and then they went off their own way, and then there was tension between us, and Harvard ditched them. Harvard played the smart game of disuniting Hindus, breaking the scholar and the activist into separate camps, making them tense, in the pretext of nurturing and helping the activists. But then they dumped them. They got nothing out of Harvard ever, and they know they won't. But it ended up spoiling the relations with me. So I can give you many such examples. Okay, and I have no hard feelings. I think Suhag is doing a very good job now. I'm very glad for her. I wish her well. I like to talk to her once in a while, and we collaborate. But I'm just giving you the history of how our people get poisoned very easily against each other, rather than being there and supporting each other. Now, let me since this is an endless topic, but let me give a few things, and then I'll close, and I'd like to have questions. I consider my commitment not to a neta, not to a political party or a government, not to the Rashtra, but to the Dharma. I'm repeating. So I want you to know 4 levels. The Dharma is what I support. That is my yagna. And my Swadharma is towards that. Now, if you look at the Vedas, Rig Veda, the word Rashtra is used as a means to an end. Rashtra is something that is the collective mobilization towards Dharma. Rashtra is not something you support for the sake of supporting some people and getting them into power or something. Rashtra has to be supported because its main purpose is to support the Dharma. And it has to support the Dharma, otherwise that is not the right kind of Rashtra. So Dharma is above Rashtra in terms of priorities for me. Rashtra, okay, is different from Rajya, also in the Vedas. I've done this huge amount of study, and this is one of my unpublished books that I'm just telling you a little bit about. Rashtra is not Rajya. You know, the person called Rashtrapati in India is actually a Rajapati. He's head of state. He's head of the ruling of the country. But Rashtra is a different concept. It is the people, the ideology, the philosophy, the tradition, the land, all the sacred places, our ancestors. Rashtra is all the material, physical, spiritual embodiment. Okay, right. And Rajya is one organ. Like if you, it gives the analogy of you have a person, and there are many organs. So similarly, Rashtra has many organs. One of them is the government. You need somebody, the Raja. The Raja, which is the government in the state in today's terms, that Raja is different from Rashtra. So we got 3 concepts now: Dharma, then Rashtra, and then Rajya. Now, Rajya, below that all is the Neta, okay, who is supporting or providing service as a Rajya, towards Rajya. And Rajya exists as an organ to help out, nurture, and empower the Rashtra. And the Rashtra exists to support the Dharma. So what has happened is the other way around now. What has happened is people are into this Neta idolatry, and there is no accountability, there's no constructive criticism. Our tradition is not about sucking up to some Neta as an idol and all that. The Neta is not to be made into a Devata. This is bullshit. It's complete utter nonsense. It has nothing to do with our Vedic tradition. With all the respect for even the greatest and finest Netas, we are supposed to question them, cross-examine them. In the Bhagavad Gita, you see in the Mahabharata, you see in all our texts, you see how sharp the debates are. Today, if you raise issues with good intention, with my whole life dedicated to this cause, I mean, I don't have to prove my good intentions. I've given up everything I could, tan, man, dhan, towards this cause. But the moment I raise issues and interrogate and have some critique and doubt with a constructive posture, I know I'm hit, I'm attacked. that who are you? Why are you doing this? This guy, I mean, it's almost like I've attacked some kind of a devata and all the fellows are going to come after me. This is not healthy. Does not build a healthy, vibrant Rashtra. What we have to build is a healthy, vibrant Rashtra. And the Rajya is not there just to win elections and be power. They have to be there as a means towards the Rashtra. And the individual Neta has to be a servant, has to be providing the service towards all of this. And the public has to be able to critique and evaluate. And the job of a public intellectual like me is to do that. And it is not out of disrespect. It could be that we have the best Neta ever we had in modern times, but even so, it is our job to keep them on their toes and to give them feedback and to be very objective and analytical about it. And so I have no regrets about taking these positions from a very objective standpoint, which I often do. And I hope the people understand that I have no bad intentions, and we should have a mechanism which is not just like-minded people talking, praising each other and all that stuff in a very controlled environment, where we should be able to have position papers that argue, debate, and things like that. So that's the kind of background I come from both my corporate life and also from the Dharma that I've studied. The vibrant debate, disagreement, dissent, all of that should be encouraged. Regarding the where is the Kurukshetra today? Well, first of all, I will tell you that a large amount of our organizations and institutions have been infiltrated by decoys, by people who have Hindu names, by people who talk like the right kind of things, who may even have a name that says they're defending Hinduism or protecting Hindu human rights and all that, but they're compromised. And I don't want to go into too many details, but I'm writing a book on this. This is going to be a big 500-600 page book. I'm only 45 days away from finishing it. I've been at it for a couple of years, working on it from 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week, working very hard at it. And I want to finish this because I think this will be a huge bombshell. Many familiar people are implicated, but a lot of people you would not suspect. A lot of people you think are really goody, nice guys, they are implicated. And I am going to put out evidence and background details on what's going on. And I'll defend it. I'll defend the book because it's a tough book and it's needed. So the Breaking India forces have infiltrated our organizations. And the Breaking India forces have appropriated more people than before. In the first Breaking India book was mainly Christian missionaries going after, village people, then some Islamists and Dravidianists and left-wing people, Maoists and so on. All that is in chapter 19 of Breaking India book. But now there's many more people. There's many more categories of ideologies and many more kinds of people who are into this. So to close and take your questions, I want to just tell you a little bit about our plans for 2022 from Infinity Foundation. We have 4 books coming. 4 books. One of them is my personal book that for which, by the way, I have a new co-author. I won't announce today, but this is a new person who's not been an author before. I'm very proud of this person, and this is going to be it is a great partnership, and this will be one of the brilliant authors in our movement in the future. So that is one. But the 3 other books are not by me. This is the good news. Our mentoring of young scholars is now producing results. So these 3 books, one of them is a major 500-page Hindi translation of one of my books, but done entirely by independent people. But the other 2 books are collections of articles by 8-10 people each. And so this means that, good 15-20 new scholars are being born in these 2 books. I may write the introduction, and I'll certainly promote it and do everything I should do to help it out. But the credit goes to these authors. They are really working hard, and you will see that the quality, the standard of scholarship is extremely high. I mean, I have not let anybody get away with some rubbish and ad hominem attacks and emotions and things they can't substantiate. Standard of rigor is very high. So we are producing now work which is not just from me, but from other people, because that has to be done. That's what I wanted to say. And as far as my own book is concerned, it's unfortunate, but I cannot disclose because I've had bad experience before disclosing to even our own people. And then the people are mischievous, they go to try to do things, and people try to subvert and block the book and start petitions against it. And this book will put on the defensive some very big names. And we are right now, what we are doing is collecting all the evidence, all the online evidence, making a backup copy, making a mirror image, because the moment they find out, they're going to start scrubbing their websites. And so we are rapidly, downloading. We have a whole team of people rapidly downloading, terabytes of storage, a lot of videos, a lot of online storage, a lot of proceedings of meetings, and a lot of private information that we've gathered, which is not in the public domain. So this will be probably launched in the middle of the year. That's my best guess, at which time I'll work with, I've already promised to Madhu Kishwar that I'll definitely have her interview me, because she's been very close to me. And I think it's only appropriate, since she was so much in the Breaking India 1.0, that now when we launch the Breaking India 2.0, she has to be part of it. And certainly I would invite CoHNA and many others, whoever wants. So thank you very much, all of you, for listening. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of the whole Breaking India journey. And I'll be very happy to take your questions. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. That was wonderful and always moving. You don't mince any words. So, sometimes people don't like that. I fully appreciate that. However, it is what it is. So we need to make sure that people understand that sometimes truth is a bitter pill to swallow. So let's take some questions. I think we have a whole lot of questions. I'm not sure if we're gonna have time for everything, but we'll go through a few. One interesting question was, is there any data that qualifies the battlescape? The whole landscape. Is there any data that you have collected? Where does when you look at us versus the adversaries, how is their financial arsenal and budget? Where do we stand against that? How do we stack up against them?
So this is a very important thing. This, until 2010, until 10 years ago, I used to keep track of, every year I used to produce a report on who's who in the study of India, and especially Hinduism. And I had 2,000 people in my database. Now it's going to be much bigger. Every year I would look at these are university professors, whether it's religion or philosophy related to India, or history or social sciences, sociology, anthropology, political thought, governance, all these music, all kind of topics for studying India. And I used to keep track of that. And I had a team. I would bring in some Princeton University scholars, students, graduate students every summer, give them internships, some of them for 6 months and longer. And then they would scan these things and we would analyze them and make a report. Nobody was listening, but I was doing this report to popularize it. The Indian ambassador in one case actually refused to even take a physical copy. I mean, so insulting. You work so hard and you've gone to present a copy. Once Dr. Karan Singh, who was such a friend of mine, all the time you would invite me to his house and have lunch with him and whatnot. But the moment I went to him once and said that this is the next publication, this is the next thing I want, and he was a very important person in the government in those days. Actually, he brought in the lunch, we had the lunch. After the lunch was over and I was saying goodbye, he took my report and said, "But ye aap le jaiye, I don't want it." And what an insult. So that is what I'm telling you. I used to monitor to get the answers to your question. I was monitoring all that. I gave up about 10 years ago because it can't be done on a big scale. It cannot be done by a small operation like us. But I handed some of that to some people in India. I said, now you take over. And if you want me to train a cell of people, I can train them. But nobody has taken it up. So I don't have those data. I did have it until 10 years ago. We were numbered in terms of money 10 to 1 easily. As far as full-time staff, paid full-time staff, because volunteer is, it's very undefined, ill-defined. There's a lot of people who come and go and they want to stick their name on something, but they're not really reliable. But I'm talking about paid staff. You could say 50 to 1. I mean, you go to these organizations, they have a full paid staff, and we need to create that. So that's what you're asking for is a very important metric. China does this, by the way. China produces a report every year. Chinese government does it. And it is from their ministry. We have no such report. I've offered to the ICCR, Indian Council of Cultural Relations, when Lokesh Chandra was the head. Before that was somebody else. And then now there's some Harsra Budeji, is nice guy, but I've gone many times. No action. What I told them is that we'll have a one-day event every year in Washington. Infinity Foundation will fund the whole thing, but I want your name on it so that people know that the Indian government is caring about it. And we'll give a report on the state of India studies in the United States. And you should do one in Europe also, everywhere. So India studies should be studied. We should do a report on who's who, what they're up to. China produces a report on the international state of China studies every year. And they blacklist those Americans they don't like. They blacklist, they say these guys are unreliable, they won't get a visa, this guy bad, this, that. And they take the ones who are good and highlight them and bring them to China and award them based on the merit of what they've produced. So China is doing that. We are not doing it.
Yeah, and I can, without naming names, I'll share 3 important points. There are 3 organizations. One organization has a staff of 297 people. Another organization has a staff of about 60 people. Another organization has a staff of over 400 people, close to 500 people. These are mainstream organizations that protect and advocate for their community. They have budgets going anywhere from about 10 to 12 million, all the way to 100 million, 200 million plus. So we can understand where we stack up. If you look at any major Hindu organization, right, they do not have more than 5 or 10, maybe maximum, maybe 20 million of an endowment, if anything, right? That's it. So you can see where we are stacking up against. So thank you.
So one thing I will disclose about without giving details about my forthcoming book is the book is in 3 parts. One of the parts of the book is focusing on a very massive institutional mechanism, which is working against us, where you would not expect it to, but it is working against us, where the Chinese have got major inroad in that, and our people are actually supporting it. Our people are actually supporting it because, it seems like it's all good and all that stuff. So this part of the book alone is around 200 pages, and I've got so much detail on what this one organization is doing. That's a book by itself.
Thank you. Another question that someone had was, you talked about sort of this umbrella organization and things like that. Wouldn't that be a single point of failure? Would that not hurt? Should we not have like individual guerrilla warfare techniques with smaller organizations? Is there a happy medium?
So it's a good point. So, an umbrella should not stifle. An umbrella should not require that everybody has to conform to them. And an umbrella should not centralize the management and operations and funding. An umbrella should provide some back office support, like legal support. I mean, if I get attacked often, I would like to just pick up the phone and say, I'm not a lawyer. You just go, these guys should fight for me. I would like that there should be a media cell that says, okay, these are all member organizations. We're going to support everything that they do in social media. They should have training camps. I would like, Nikunj, this is for you. You're a young guy and you're a guy who carries things out. I would like you to conduct a Hindu boot camp. Okay. Like military has boot camp. For those who don't know, boot camp is when you join the US Army, you put through boot camp. Boot camp is for several weeks to get rid of all the weak people. If you're no good, they're going to make you get up in the morning and do tough things physically, emotionally, mentally, put up with insults, put up with all kind of stuff. Nobody's there hugging you and making you feel good, because that's not how you become a tough soldier. So boot camp is to toughen you, to test you if you're tough enough, and to teach you some skills to fight in the battlefield, which is absolutely rugged. The worst, mean, cruel, evil people are going to be after you. So they simulate that. That's a boot camp. Our people are too much into too kind of want to be hugged and too soft and, unable to be psychologically robust. And so boot camp is to make people psychologically toughened. So the Hindu boot camp is needed. And now that's the kind of a program which the umbrella could do. I mean, you don't have to be running the projects, but you could be offering these kind of things. You could be offering maybe collective funding mechanism. You could be offering public relations. I mean, there are 5 or 10 PR issues that go everybody faces. I mean, whether it's the caste, cows, curry, chaos, Dalits, this, that, whatever it is, minorities, there are some things like that. So the umbrella organization should be funding on that level all the time, producing movies, documentaries, animations, reports, from a small report that can be used in a school to a college level report to a book to a conference. I mean, this should be their job. I mean, they should take over this Swadeshi Indology that we have. We would be happy to work with somebody like that. We can even do all the work, but they should take it over and expand its scope so that it's not only an Infinity Foundation project. You know what the umbrella could do? Take the best practices of each of the members. So let's say Infinity Foundation does big books and produces good scholarship, and Infinity Foundation does Swadeshi Indology. CoHNA does certain things very well. CoHNA does certain kind of events very well. Hindu American Foundation does certain things very well, etc., etc. So they could take the best of everybody. Madhu Kishwa's organization does great things certain ways. So you take the best of everybody and you scale it, help them scale it. Take it under your wing and say, okay, we are going to now expand beyond what your ability to market is. We will market it in a bigger way. They should do that. I would turn over my 14 volumes on the history of Indian science and technology. I wanted to turn it over to IIT people. They wouldn't accept it. The Ministry of HRD Ministry, they gave all kind of nonsensical committee here and there. They made all sorts of people. Now, these are products that we produced. And when I'm gone, this will die. Somebody should take it over, and it's like a free gift. I don't want money. I don't want royalty. I want nothing for it. I just want someone to adopt it and take it forward. And so whatever are the best things we've done and whatever the best things that other people have done could be pooled, and there could be an umbrella organization doing that without coming in the way. And I'm not talking about people from Nagpur sending their people to go run Infinity and telling CoHNA how to do his job better. They don't know how to do his job better. They should stay out of that. They should not interfere. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for them to please be generous and help us out like a big brother, because we need this help.
Yeah, no, I understand. The Hindu boot camp idea is pretty interesting. So let's explore that.
You do a Hindu boot camp, I'll come and I'll be one of the instructors. I'll be one of the guys that is supposed to be the mean, tough guy, and then they have to fight me.
So another question, a lot of times, people think that we don't question what goes on in the Indian government or anything like that. So you have actually done a lot of that stuff. So people want a couple of the questions is like a lot of our netas, right? They sometimes come over here from different groups. BJP is obviously in power today, but there are others who come here. They're here doing chai pe charcha type of thing, come for some kind of a meet and greet, and then go away, right? So the question is, what are your thoughts on that? How can we impact that? How can we question them? And how can we work with them?
So one of the case studies in my forthcoming book is that there is this person in a very big brand, mainstream, large organization in the United States, who's been a mischievous fellow on his role, his postures on India, very negative on CAA's, Article 370, human rights, you name it, and very long history of Chinese people funding him. Long history of Chinese people funding him through various consulting organizations. We've named them. We've quoted all this stuff. So here is this guy, clearly compromised, but he's not in a Chinese organization, he's in an American organization, but the Chinese have made inroads and funded him. So we have got a case study where actually he does a series of interviews with a prominent Indian neta who comes from India to the United States. And this guy is able to get negative things out of him, slanderous things out of him, because makes that guy the Indian neta, he makes it very comfortable. And gets all this nasty stuff out of him, which could be useful quotes against India. So this is going on because I think there's no training. The Ministry of External Affairs does not have a kind of a combat training of our people. The diplomats are trained how to defend India on issues like Kashmir and nuclear issue and line of actual control. When it's politics on the ground, the Indian diplomats are well trained to protect the Indian point of view. But when it's issues of civilization and ideology and culture and those kind of things, they'll duck the issue. At best, they'll avoid the issue. They'll give some one-liner and get out of it, but they're not able to give a response. In this book, I have a 80-page response. One chapter, 80 pages, the biggest one, is on a response to one of the most important issues that we are facing all the time, for which I do not think our people have developed a good response. They've developed a little bit here and there, but this is an 80-page, very, very detailed, solid response, and I hope our people will read it. That's what the purpose is. We need an institution. We don't have something like the Council on Foreign Relations, the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations, which is sort of the intellectual breeding ground for future leaders. It's been around for a very long time. It's produced senators and presidents and congressmen and ambassadors, all kind of people. And at any one point in time, there's hundreds of people in there, and they're having all these kind of events. I'm a member. Anybody can just pay their dues and become a member, so you can know what they're doing. And there are many such think tanks. You look at the Hoover Institute. You look at the Rand Corporation. You look at Brookings for the liberal Democrat side with couple thousand people. So in India, this kind of a think tank to train our people, unfortunately, the Americans are running it. You look at the think tanks in India. It's the Brookings and those kind of people, Carnegie. What the Americans have done is to set up a branch in India and capture the Indian intellectuals onto their wavelength. They'll bring in the son, daughter, or some family member of some prominent Indian person who's got a lot of connections, and they'll make that person a big shot. And then that person picks the phone and makes all the connections and brings everybody. I'm exposing all that also. I'm exposing how Indian elite have been roped in, have been compromised, and what are some of the examples where their work is harming India in a very serious way. But because of the name and the reputation of the person involved, nobody touches them. And that's my job to expose all that. So it's not I don't do things to become popular. People keep saying, oh, but they'll hate you. I'm not looking to be, I have great respect for Subramanian Swamy, Dr. Swamy, but one difference is he's a politician. He needs votes. He needs to get appointment. I couldn't care less. I already left a very successful business career, and I had all the success I wanted to in that sense, more than any Indian government or any government could possibly give me. I already enjoyed it. I had my fill. So I'm not looking to get any appointment. I don't want to become a neta. They can't hire me. They can't fire me. So I can do all this. I can expose it, and I'm not concerned that it'll bring me in bad, they won't like it, because I've never been bothered by whether they like it or not. An intellectual has to be like this. You let the chips fall where they may. And the chips will fall in this new book, will fall in a way that will not spare anybody, left, right, whoever they are. Whoever is a culprit that ought to be named is going to be named. So what you are talking about is a problem that requires this type of analysis. And hopefully out of this kind of analysis, some solutions will come. And there will be organizations that think beyond partisan, not thinking of this party, that party, not thinking short term, what's the next election, but thinking about the Rashtra long term. We need somebody who wants to think about the Rashtra long term without worrying about parties.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rajiv ji. I think we're going to move on to the next panel. I'm going to ask Madhu ji to turn on her video. Let me just add to the pins. Wonderful. So thank you, Rajiv ji, for that. This leads right into our next session, which is about India in the Battle of Civilizations. Chapter 19 of the book, as you had mentioned earlier, talks about India's position in the Battle of Civilization and how certain forces are working overtime to create internal problems within India and to delegitimize our civilization at world stages. These forces, while they're antithetical to each other, often or most of the times as almost always work together in India. So this next session will have thoughts on those who are these forces, how they work today, what are the challenges we see in front of the Indian community globally, how has this evolved from where it was 10 years ago, and where do we stand today? So on the panelists, we have, of course, Rajiv ji, but I would like to extend a warm welcome to Srimati Madhu Kishwar ji. Madhu Purnima Kishwar is an Indian academic and commentator and is currently employed as the chair and national professor in the Indian Council of Social Science Research. She's a senior fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library and former professor at the Center for Study of Developing Societies. Madhu Kishwarji is, along with fellow academic Ruth Vanita, co-founded the Journal of Manushi. A well-known author of several books, she has received her postgraduate degree in history from Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. And she has been a tremendous inspirer for many, many of us throughout the years. So welcome, Madhuji. Thank you for joining the panel. Unfortunately, General G.D. Bakshi is not able to join today because of the ongoing war in between Russia and Ukraine. He has been called into certain commentaries and certain thinkings. So he sends his apologies. But I would like to...
Nikunji,
yes?
I just want to interrupt. He just called me that he will join.
Oh, perfect.
So
Wonderful.
he will be a bit late, but he plans to join.
Okay, great. So Madhuji, maybe we can start with your comments. Welcome.
Yeah, Rajiv, I'm honored to be present when you're discussing your forthcoming book, because Breaking India, in my view, is one of the most important books of 21st century. And the role it has played in awakening people to the dangers at hand, the dangers that are staring at us in the face, but people didn't know. You helped to not only connect the dots, but also cleared the fog. And a whole generation of not just youngsters, but even my generation have drawn inspiration from the work you did, you put into this. I mean, all your books are path-breaking. They break new ground. So each one of them has played a role. But to my mind, the political role that it has played as an activist, the title itself was very catchy and very appropriate. And the content you put in, garnered over years, really helped clear the fog and help people understand what they were facing. Why is it that things seem to go wrong? We tend to blame our political leaders. Oh, we elected this government and we voted for that government. But the forces that are actually tying the hands and minds of our elected representatives, as well as the bureaucracy and all agencies of the state, you helped nail them with precision. And I think really that even if you did nothing else but had done this book, your life would be very well lived, would be counted as very well spent. But of course, there is such a vast volume of literature you produced, no less important, but this I still think has played a very crucial role. And it then opened up people's minds to your other scholarship. Now, it's interesting that the forces that you describe, you know, I've grown up among them because I'm one of those few who started taking an active interest in social political issues from my teenage. So most of the activism that started came later, is actually in a way post Madhu Kishwar. I have seen all these people get activized. Many of them actually got activized thanks to their connect with Manushi, but very soon were trapped and sucked in by the foreign donor agencies that you've described, the activities that you've described so well. Now, as someone who from day one, I had no idea which Devi Shakti made me mistrustful of foreign donor agencies at a time when information about them was not really much known. I'm talking about the year 89 when we founded Manushi. 88 when we founded Manushi. At that time, not much was known, but I have no idea. They had not proliferated as widely in India as they are today. But one of the first decisions I took was we shall not accept foreign funding, no donor agencies. And actually, I even said no government funding. because I know what governments do when they tie you to their apron strings. And I think that was the wisest decisions I took, even though there was not much knowledge on the basis of which I took that decision. For me, it was just a matter of simple atma-samman, self-esteem, that if we are to take on the problems of India, make this a country that we can be proud of, this is a task we must do on our own steam, on our own strength. We must dip into our own pockets. We must give selflessly as a debt of gratitude to our motherland, rather than do it as a profession, just as you've done. I was also inspired by similar motives, that we must do it in the spirit of giving, as a debt of gratitude to our motherland and to our ancestors, who actually, against the most unimaginably harsh circumstances, they stayed firm and steadfast in their dharma. You and I wouldn't be Hindus today, but for the sacrifices that our ancestors made in order not to convert, the seduction that they resisted, and the punishments they must have borne with quiet dignity in order not to convert. Otherwise, this dialogue would not have been possible. So that debt of gratitude we needed to pay, that was my idea. And that's not something I wanted to do at the behest of any foreign donor agencies. Now, it's interesting, Rajiv. I'm one of the few, I don't know anybody else who said no to foreign donor agencies so steadfastly, so consistently, and with such clarity at a very young age. And to start with, it's not as if I was attacking them. I just wanted to just keep my self-esteem intact. But I became a persona non grata very soon, because I said no to the likes of Ford Foundation. They take it as an insult. They take it as an affront, that you want to give the message that you can be a socially active and a politically active citizen taking on issues without their help. And not carry a begging bowl in order to say, oh, our society is so bad, our men are such horrible patriarchs, they're brutes, and we need your help, we need your protection in order to fix things in our society. That's the message they wanted all activists to carry. And the fact that I simply said no to that, I think I paid from the very start a very, very heavy price for it. The defamation campaigns, and interestingly, Rajiv, those who unleashed these are mostly commies, CPM activists. They were in the forefront. Maoists, even in those days, the CPML activists, you would imagine that they wouldn't want to touch US imperialist money, and they wouldn't want to be their puppets. But no, they all gravitated. And this alliance that I saw at a very early age between foreign Western donor agencies and our communist mafia, as I would call them today, woke me to the fact that there was something amiss, that something very sinister was happening. Otherwise, these two have no reason to be together, but they are. And your book also proves what a deep alliance they faced. At that time, the Islamic forces were still muted. They were not so aggressive as they have turned out today. Now, as it so happened, because I started political activism very early on as a teenager, many of these India breakers that you have documented, and many of them you've named, were well known to me as Manushi subscribers. Many of them also at one time were friends or colleagues. I had grown up among them. But because I opposed foreign funded NGOs and their fake agendas and the flaky issues they took up, the interesting thing is, though in this book you haven't done with it, but the issues that I immediately got into confrontation with them about was around social legislation, laws affecting families, laws, social reform laws. And I began critiquing them from very early on, each one of them, as they were being introduced, at the behest of these NGOs, the manner in which the government of India, for example, became hostage to their agendas and was willing to pass any number of laws without application of mind, without going through the merits of the case, without actually getting sound legal brains to even look at those laws. They passed through the parliament without even a debate, simply because it was politically fashionable to talk of empowerment of women, empowerment of Dalits, empowerment of this and that. And we passed such noxious laws under their influence. And I was taking them on that front. Their agendas, the laws that they were trying to push down our throat. And honestly, at that time, there was no support. Most people thought I was a crackpot, for saying no to the lakhs and crores I could get, instead of being hand to mouth. And in those days, as a salary as a lecturer was a few hundred rupees. It wasn't even in thousands. And yet it's from our own pockets that we started Manushi. The initial capital was just 800 rupees from our own pockets, and without an office, without a table, without a typewriter. I don't know how we survived those years. And yet saying no to the lakhs that they were willing to offer us every year. Everybody thought I was a crackpot, and many tried to even persuade me that I was being cussed. But their agendas became clear, and I'm so grateful that I went through those trials and tribulations, Rajiv. Stayed steadfast. I was willing to shut down Manushi, but was not willing to run it with their money. But it was a very, very lonely journey till I met you, Rajiv. In terms of finding a companion, an intellectual comrade, a political comrade, somebody you were grappling at that time too when we first met. And we were both finding our way. I too was trying to figure out the world I was living in. I'd started Manushi with, starry-eyed idealism, thinking that all those who came or set up NGOs or social organizations were inspired by noble motives, till I found it was all a matter of selling yourself to the highest bidder. That's really what this activism was all about. It was about jet setting. It was about negotiating jobs in foreign universities, invitations to conferences, lecture tours. That's about all that they aimed at. And it didn't matter what they were asked to do, which issues they were asked to support. In fact, it's at that time that I began to say that all these friends of mine, these activists, if someone offered to pay them $500 a day or even $100 a day for spitting on their parents' faces morning, evening, and night, they'll happily do it and think that that's the smartest thing to do. Because the kind of things they were doing, they were spitting on their own culture, they were spitting on their own country, they were spitting on the civilizational heritage of this land, and they were spitting on their own people, treating them with the same imperious disdain that colonial masters used to do, or Christian missionaries, the disdain they brought for Hindu civilization and faith with them in an attempt to subjugate us morally, spiritually, financially, economically, emotionally. They were playing the same game and using the same vocabulary. That self-hating variety of Hindu really made me so sick. And that's really what connected you and I. And we then tried working together. Remember the two conferences that you financed while I was a professor at the CSDS, Religions and Cultures in the Indic Civilization. My colleagues were stunned that with such a small amount of money, we had a small corpus for those. I remember it was $20,000 for a conference. And yet we had 450 people from all over the world come at their own cost to read papers. They said, 450 to kabhi hue nahi hai. How did Rajiv and you manage something like that? Not only that, they said, isme to kam se kam 1.5 crore kharcha hota agar koi dhang se hum jaise ko karne ko bolta. So that again gave me an insight into how much ayashi there was into even conferencing with globally. And we did it, I think, reasonably well. But I think that was a trial balloon. I wasn't so clear how this narrative was to be shaped. And at that time, I remember I tried to say, let's bring the left and the right together for a dialogue. But over the years, we found out they don't want dialogue. They only want to persecute you, to defame you in absentia. They will not come. I think that was the only time the left and the non-left came together. Never before nor after. But I'm not sure what it triggered. But the point that I would like to emphasize is the use of the word Indic. I think that was the first time it was put in academic circulation. And now, of course, it's become very commonplace. And now both of us have moved from Indic to saying Hindu. We are Dharmic civilization, Sanatan Dharma. Even Indic as a broad category, because it includes things that I'm not sure both of us are ready to embrace today. Now, what I find most inspiring about you and your work and this book and the exposés that you have done of all these three forces you talk about, I don't think people understood it as well as you documented how mutually hostile forces globally, namely Christian missionaries, Islamic jihadis, and Maoists or communists, all these three don't really have much in common. But when it comes to India, they are together as a gang. They are together as a gang to say, let's first deal with the Hindus, decimate them, break up India into pieces, then we'll divide it among ourselves. That game plan is very clear. And that's where China, with its Maoist brigade and promotion of insurgency in the Northeast and in the name of socialist councils and this, that, and the other, as well as US missionaries, Baptist missionaries, and a whole lot of other conversion mafias let loose by the West. They come together very easily, no conflict. And they all then join together to rise in defense of a force that is elsewhere in the world actually under sharp attack, namely Islamic Jihad. Here, we are not even allowed to say we need to protect ourselves from terrorist attacks because religion, terror has no religion, so we are not allowed to even connect the dots and say almost all terrorism in India and perhaps even globally is coming from Islamists. Even to say that makes you Islamophobic, makes you a Hindu fascist, no less. So I think the manner in which in the last chapter, you bring all these three forces together and you show the commonality of purpose that they have was really prescient, was very, very prescient. Many may have sensed it. And at that time, since Islam was not as aggressive, the Muslims were still getting away with the narrative that they are a hapless minority and they are always persecuted by Hindus through riots, they are marginalized, but that was far from the case. The other thing very notable about your book is that the mask of piety that Christian missionaries wear, you unmask them very effectively. I find that while people are still willing to accept that Islam poses a threat. But Christian missionaries, they're so good. They provide education to the poor. They set up schools where government doesn't have schools. They educate the poor. They set up hospitals. They do social work. They find jobs for these people. There's that. That narrative is so strong. And for it to be so strong in a country where so much of insurgency in the Northeast, in the Red Corridor in central India is actually church-based. Well, church is the launching pad. Church provides the launching pads for terrorists. If our army and security forces and the police and the administration is not allowed to even name these places, leave alone search them, leave alone take action against them when they nurture these forces, these secessionist forces, where are we? I mean, they've defanged the Indian state. They've actually rendered it napunsak through this phony secularism, which hangs like a millstone round our neck. Now, I personally find it very, very inspirational. These people, this entire breakup India mafia, I was instinctively against them, and I abandoned many friendships and chalked a lonely path. I would not attend their meetings because I was to feel I'll suffocate and choke and puke. I stopped attending their conferences. I had to stop reading that literature because it used to so annoy me. And I would deal with them only through my writing. But you, Rajiv, the amazing thing about you is you would walk right into their battlefield and you will challenge them in their battleground, month after month, year after year, and you would engage with them even when they pretended they didn't notice you, even when they pretended they never read anything you wrote, because they would have to otherwise answer. To me, that was real courage, the intellectual Kshatriya that you want, Kshatriyahood that you want the Indian youths to adopt. Well, you showed it. You demonstrated it almost every day of your life. Till now, you are, of course, a fully matured guru now of how to not just be an intellectual Kshatriya, but to prepare generations of them with nurture and care. Now, the other important contribution, I would say, that you made actually in this book, the manner in which you describe in detail while naming the actual players that are subverting India, is not to shy away from taking names, not to shy away by identifying them, their organizations and the persons concerned. Mostly people don't have that kind of courage. My only request to you, Rajiv, is that in your next book, please, in your footnotes, the footnotes should be on the same page. Because it's too, not only that it's difficult to keep going back and forth and go to the end pages where the footnotes are given, but very often you don't give the details of the case. You'll say the wife of so-and-so did so-and-so, and then you give a reference, Indian Express or some other publication where the full information is. But that information, we'll have to go to the newspaper to get the full. Please provide it on the same page, even though in brief, and the footnote on the same page, even though, and if possible, the link, because people should get the details of the details of each case ready at hand. To me, that's a big, that would be a big favor. Now, this book should have been, in my view, compulsory reading for the Indian Administrative Service trainings. It should be compulsory reading for police training institutes. It should be compulsory reading even for the army, because if they don't know the enemy, I find it very depressing that in their training, so many senior police officers, so many army generals have told me that all these facts were unknown. When I wrote about the UPSC jihad, so many senior IS officers, so many senior bureaucrats, army men, policemen, retired director generals of police told me, but we weren't ever given this information in our training or in later meetings or even in strategy meetings. Now, your book should have been compulsory reading for them to know how serious it is for them to know all this. But while the people of India, concerned citizens of India, have embraced your book, have actually, I don't know why you sound such a pessimistic note, because your expectations are much higher than the current generation is able to fulfill. But I personally feel that you have no reason to feel distressed about it, because the awakening is real. The groundswell is real. The bottom is waking up, rising up. The leaders at the top are still not ready to face this. The first time, perhaps, in Indian history that most of our leaders who people had trusted are today being dragged by the nose by the people to say, please take note. You read the social media and you see how much battering the governments are getting when they do wrong by Hindus. Even those leaders who identify themselves as Hindu Hriday Samrats are getting a good battering if they fail on crucial issues. And I think you played a very important role in that awakening. And the phrases that you have coined, whether it's breaking India or intellectual Kshatriyas and many others, are today common parlance. You see how often they are used on social media and even in academic writing now. So honestly, the government may be tardy, lethargic, but then from nowhere, we have somebody like Yogi Adityanath rise on the horizon, on whom people are pegging much more hope because he promises to be of a different genre. Hemant Biswa Sharma comes from the Congress fold, but look at the kind of clear-sighted politics he's pursuing and the manner in which he's articulating without hesitation Hindu interests and safeguarding Hindu Rashtra, not Hindu Rashtra, it isn't. I hope one day we will be able to move in that direction. The Rashtra that you talked about, not the nation state that is India, but Rashtra that is rooted in Hindu values. But they've begun to talk in that language. In Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, the present president, I think, of BJP for Tamil Nadu is speaking that language, and people are pinning a lot of hopes on him. And there are many such leaders emerging from nowhere. So I really think you don't have any reason to be so pessimistic. A lot of people draw inspiration from you. A lot of people have learned from you and therefore are following in your footsteps. Yes, we're not well organized, but you know that setting up an organizational platform where people work as a cohesive force, even you didn't have time to do that because you wanted to get your books, you wanted to get the message out. You didn't have time to create that kind of a platform that's needed, the kind that you are now urging other people to set up, because the work you had to do was so important. And I'm very certain, Rajiv, that in the years and decades to come, you will see the blossoming of dozens of such platforms and countless more determined leaders which will follow the path that you would like our political leaders to take in the decades to come, if we are to survive as a Rashtra, as a civilization, as a culture, as people, That has to happen, or else, of course, there is doom and despair. But then nobody else has the answer. And I'm sure you agree that increasingly many people, even in the West, are looking to India to provide answers even to their personal existential dilemmas. So, हमारी ज्ञान परंपरा को जो आपने एक फिलिप दिया है, वो ज्ञान परंपरा अब दबने वाली शायद नहीं है, और वो ज्ञान परंपरा ऐसे ही लोग आगे बढ़ाएंगे जिनका अपना कोई स्वार्थ नहीं है, जो इस यज्ञ में अपनी उनके पास आहुति देने के लिए कुछ है, और जो पब्लिक लाइफ में सिर्फ लेने आते हैं, लूटने खसूटने आते हैं, उनकी तरफ देखना भी मुझे लगता है व्यर्थ है। आने वाले वर्षों में, दशकों में बहुत से राजीव मल्होत्रा इस देश में पैदा होंगे, और मुझे लगता है कि आपका जो काम है, यू scattered the seed so wide, you will see a very rich harvest in the years to come. Thank you. And thank you for being my friend and an inspirational one at that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Madhuji, for the wonderful address. Let me add General G.D. Bakshi ji, who is now joining us. Thank you, General Bakshi ji. Can you hear us? I think you are on mute. So I just want to make sure you can hear us. Okay, perfect. A quick introduction about General Bakshi ji. Major General Gagandeep Bakshi, or G.D. Bakshi as he's known, is a retired Indian Army officer. He is from the 6th Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, commissioned in the Indian Army for the IMA Dehradun in November 1971. He was awarded the Vishisht Seva Mandal for commanding a battalion in the Kargil War. Later, he was awarded the Sena Mandal for distinguishing service in commanding a battalion during the counter-insurgency drives. He subsequently commanded the Romeo Force, part of the Rashtriya Rifles, during intensive counter-insurgency operations in Rajouri and Puch districts of Jammu and Kashmir, and succeeded in suppressing the armed militancy in this area. He has served 2 tenures at the Directorate General of Military Operations and was the first BGS at the Northern Command, where he dealt with information warfare and psychological operations. He's a public personality and TV commentator on topics related to the military and defense, India's War of Independence, and historical perspective. Welcome, General G.D. Bakshi. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. I and Rajiv go back a very long time. When this book was first launched, you know, I was a Deputy Director Research in the Vivekanand International Foundation. And the director then was the legendary Mr. Ajit Doval, Kirti Chakra, now the National Security Advisor of India, hands-on National Security Advisor, you know, most active, rather I would say proactive in matters of that pertain to India's national security. And he told me that this is a book that must be a primer, and we must do everything in our power to propagate its central message, its forecast, its warning forecast, because the nation needs to be sensitized. The nation needs to know, as my friend Arnab Goswami is fond of saying, the nation needs to know. I think we need to know. We are under a concerted informational attack of trying to seek out and, you know, widen our fault line, identify every fault line in Indian society and make sure that it is used to break up India. So the title of the book was explicit, Breaking India, because that exact project had been started by the British, shaken them to the core. They never anticipated that a society so caste, you know, dominated by divisions and fault lines of caste, creed, language, religion, resistance to British rule, to British penetration of our society, to British attempts at proselytizing, right? And they were shaken. So they managed to quell that revolt. Unfortunately, we had no unified leadership. The only ranks primarily, which was very strongly affected a bit in the Bombay Presidency Army and not so much in the Madras Presidency Army, though a little bit, yes. But the fact of the matter was that it was the Indian soldiers who revolted. And the Indian soldiers, the highest rank that they held at POs, Havaldars, Nayaks and Lant Nayak, the military training, the kind of vision with which they could have, led that war at the level of general. Because catapulting man much. And therefore, the revolt took place in bits and pieces. Had all the 80,000 Indian troops revolted at one time, the Raj would have been taken. And then the British very cleverly then used the Sikhs. The Sikhs had just been defeated by the Purbaiyas, as they call them contemptuously, of the British Indian Army, and they hated them for it. So they stayed out of this revolt, and the British fully exploited that. And then don't forget that the Sikhs were the military arm of Hinduism. It's revolt against the tyrannical Aurangzeb. It's sort of against Mughal tyranny. They were every family for the freedom from oppression. The British now, integrated, absorbed the Sikh mass scale into the British Indian Army and the Punjabi Muslims and the hill tribes who had largely stayed aloof. And then they now insisted that recruitment to the Sikh regiment would be only for the Keshdharis, not the Namdharis. Otherwise, my ancestors were part of the Sikh, military renaissance. Bhai Mati Das, Bhai Sati Das, they are from my family line. Banda Bairagi, Punjab. So all the families in the Punjab used to contribute one ton to the Khalsa to fight against Mughal over tyranny. And it's a fact that in 1 century, they had uprooted and overthrown the Mughal Empire, and under Ranjit Singh, the Sikhs had gone and captured parts of Afghanistan. Though all the territory of West Pakistan now was under Sikh rule, and they had gone up to Jalalabad in Afghanistan, and they held it, they ruled it. Hari Singh Nalwa was the governor. So the first fault line that the British created was between the Hindus and the Sikhs. And they are now trying to widen this fault line to resuscitate some kind of a terrorist movement in the Punjab under their project, Kashmir Khalistan project. They are to somehow spark off in the Punjab. It's not for want of trying. The next fault line that they really addressed was the caste fault line. Please don't forget that after 1857, the British, and for this they said, identify every fault line in the society and break it up so thoroughly that it will never get together for a combined revolt against the Raj. The most significant fault line that they identified was of caste. The word caste comes from the Portuguese word casta. There is no word called caste in Sanskrit, in Hindi. There was no word called caste till the British introduced it by using the Portuguese word casta. And, the first author of the first caste-based census in India, the name is just slipping, it will just come back to me, but he famously went on record to state he held the first caste-based census in 1872. And he famously went on record to say that as long as there is caste, there will be no India. Sir, today your entire political discourse is dominated by caste and caste equation, and all political parties are fighting on the basis of caste. You have your students stuck in Ukraine. Why did they have to go there? Because 50% seats in medical colleges are reserved on the basis of caste. The British never had added an economic dimension to caste. You've done it, and congratulations to you. You split this country in such a thorough manner that even the British could not achieve that. Now the British are only trying to widen those caste fault lines. You've given them that opportunity. Why can't we shift from the sub-identity of caste, go back to, if you want to carry on with affirmative action, with reservation, if you can't live without it, it was meant to be for a short time. Even Ambedkar said so. He had a time horizon of 20, 30, 40 years. This has gone on for 75, and at this rate, it will go on for 7,500 years. I mean, this is utter nonsense. Why can't you make reservations in colleges, in jobs, based upon the economic criteria? Help the poor industrializes. When a society urbanizes, caste becomes irrelevant. It was stuck into the agricultural era. You are trying to make caste, you've given it a new lease of relevance post-independence, which is despicable, it is horrible. I mean, the colonial masters, we can understand their need to divide and rule. Why are you doing it to the fault lines, caste barriers? The RSS was at the forefront of that effort, and soon they burnt their electoral fingers in Uttar Pradesh. I mean, the bastion of caste, and in Bihar and other places, and they quickly recoiled and they went back, and their caste calculation, OBC, Maha-OBC, etc., are far more complex than it was in the British period. We just can't seem to get ourselves above the fault lines that the British imposed upon us, and now they are available to each and every one of our adversaries to exploit to the hilt. And the worst fault line in this caste equation is the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe fault. Scheduled castes have been activated now in a very major way. Bhim Army, Panther Army, etc. Host of armies, whole host of fault line was first exploited in Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Assam, Bodos, you see, Boros as they call themselves, and then it has now spread to central India, to the Bhil, the Gond, the Mundas, all the Central Asian tribes are in full-scale revolt, instigated from outside and aided and abetted by our own stupidity. And it has become so lethal that in one ambush, the Maoists have killed 75 CRPF troopers, which is being celebrated in some colleges and universities. The left is the biggest rear guard of the empire that we have seen. They took charge of our academia. Why? India ceded its academia to left and, religious rear guards. I cannot understand. We handed over our syllabi, we handed over our this thing, and 3 to 4 education ministers in a row were from a particular community, and it had its toxic impact. It had its toxic impact. So the caste fault line also finds its extension in the north for you, the Max Mullers and the Mortimer Wheelers. They rewrote your history. They foisted a history on you that the Indus Valley civilization was Dravidian, that the Aryans were invaders. So what was the rationale for this historical infliction? Chor, chor, musere bhai. Tum chor, hum bhi chor. You are invaders, we are invaders. So what are you bitching about? What are you craving about colonial British colonizing India? It shows that there is no difference in the genes north and south of the Vindhyas. There is no difference, and if there was in Tamil literature any record of a retreat from the Indus to, the Kaveri and the Krishna and the Godavari, it finds mention, the rivers that you cross find mention, and you impose your set of names, you get the old names and impose them on the new rivers that you come to. It's utter nonsense. Now we have found the first denial was there was no Saraswati river. Because the Saraswati, existence of the Saraswati demolishes the entire Aryan invasion argument. We have got satellite imagery evidence. We've got, the paleological studies evidence, etc., etc., genetic evidence to show that there was a Saraswati. And what is more likely is that there was an out of India migration, not an into India migration. So that takes care of that Dravidian fault line. But as Rajiv pointed out so presciently, and I'm talking of a decade plus back, when this book was released in the Vivekananda International Foundation, it was like a seismic event. And the then director of the foundation was very keen that this should be spread all over. In fact, I must, the first chance that I get, go back to him and remind him to make sure that this is introduced into the syllabi of the Sardar Patel IPS Academy, of the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy at Mussoorie. And Rajiv, I would request you that the time has come for you to come back to India on a crusade to spread this mission, to sensitize the people, sensitize the bureaucracy. The local people, may I assure you, Rajiv, through the social media, this has become the dominant narrative. The people are very, very well aware. And now the BJP, RSS are making inroads south of the Vindhya. Karnataka is with you today, etc. And we will go further south. Because these specious, narratives created, foisted on us by the British are getting demolished. But that demolition exercise now must require an urgency, and for which you will have to come here. You will have to come here. You will have to preach to our bureaucrats, to our IPS guys. We'll try and see if we can get you towards the National Defence College, where the brightest and the best of the armed forces come. And in fact, you must speak there, because they also have people from IPS, IFS. You must speak to the IFS Academy. How is it that they don't know about Indian narrative? How is it that those youngsters are totally brainwashed by the court historian? They quite obviously, to pass his exam, Romila Thapar is the caste queen. To pass his exam of the independence movement, it is Bipin Chandra Pal, that court bootlicker. And now the Raman Chandra Guhas of the world, and the Irfan Habibs and the others of the world, who have dominated the narrative. If any guy has to get into the The textbook is Ramila Thapar. The textbook is Irfan Habib. The textbook is Bipin Chandra Pal. And the highest levels of distortion are in ancient Indian history and in modern Indian history. The freedom struggle. The role of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, who wanted to take this country beyond caste, creed, language, ethnic barriers and fault lines. Is the greatest contribution of that man. Had he taken charge, we would have had a different India today. We would have a modern country instead of a caste bastion. A bastion of caste more deeply entrenched than it was in the times of the empire. Thanks to these leftist subaltern historians, these foot soldiers, as you call them, of the empire, this deserter, this leftover of the empire, who've taken it upon themselves to see that these brown, people, these black, non-white people cannot change a word of what Max Muller said. Did Max Muller have access to satellite data? Did Max Muller have access to paleo channel mapping? Did Max Muller have access to the kind of archaeological evidence that B.B. Lal and the others and Bisht and the others have taken out? Did he have access to radiocarbon dating? You see, this is that slavish colonial mindset. They have psychologically enslaved you. You've not been able to break those psychological chains. That you still think Max Muller is the last word. What the hell was he? What was his claim to fame? As per him, the world started in 4500 BC. So how could the Vedas have come anything earlier than 1500 BC? Back of the envelope calculation. Gospel truth. Dare you try and change it? Your Rajiv, 7 years of BJP, not one textbook has been changed. Rajiv, you have to come back. The Kurukshetra is here. The Dharma Kshetra is here. I know we have reached through the social media, and I'm glad you have revived. I'm very sorry that you were unwell, but you look better now. You look better now. And may I call upon you? May I call upon you to do your civilization. You must, and we will now target the decision IPS Academy, the National Defence College, the Staff College, because this narrative must be shared. This narrative must be spread. It must become the dominant narrative. You see, the continuity, the cultural which they found little terracotta dolls of women with in the center of the forehead, vermilion in the center parting of the head. You found terracotta in meditation postures. Dhi and yoga, Dhi for dhyana and yoga. These are the hallmarks of the Indian civilization. They are, by carbon dating, 9,500 years old. And there are some evidence that it is even older. Ages are being pushed back in Taipei and Turkey and the other places. They are being pushed back. We must do some of this again. Mera Gar, almost to 7,000 years plus. And the Saraswati civilization is up to 9,000 years plus. At Birhana, where the IIT Kharagpur did carbon dating, they've done fluoride dating. So when are you going to integrate this data to change the historical paradigm? In the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, biochemistry, we've done a lot of advances. Our students are doing very well. But in the social sciences, we have a leftist liberal clique of foot soldiers, sepoys of the Raj, which are holding sway. And this government being in power after 7 years cannot change that, because I find the bureaucracy is convinced that we can't change history with the change of every government. We can't saffronize history. Sir, We are not asking you to saffronize history. We are asking you to put your history on an empirical, factual basis of the truth. The truth concerns us all. You cannot inherit narratives from the empire which were designed to divide and rule, which were designed to justify, you know, our constitution, Rajiv. It starts with, it is by the way a reprint of the 1935 Government of India Act, right? By and large, and you know, in the preamble, we the people of India decided to. It doesn't start with liberty, social justice. And let me delve a little into the background of social justice. Social justice came from a British concept of imperial justice. What was imperial justice, sir? Imperial justice was that the people of India are so fragmented socially, linguistically, ethnically, caste-wise, creed-wise, etc., 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 that they will keep squabbling amongst themselves, and no government, indigenous Indian government, will be above its caste, caste connection, caste predilection, or religious predilections, or ethnic or linguistic predilection. They will be unfair to the other. The only people who can be just are the British. So India can be ruled in a just fashion only by people from outside. That was the imperial justice concept. Our constitution deftly changed imperial justice to social justice, and they said that the anointed rulers of India now is the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty, Anglophiles of the Raj, collaborators of the Raj, who must now rule. They are only because, he was educated in Eton and Harrow, old chap, so proper he was. Only that dynasty is fit to rule. And they ruled. Almost 60 years they have ruled non-stop. It's only now that a churn has taken place when the social media came. Because they had a stranglehold on the print media, they had a stranglehold on the electronic media, the Doordarshan of that era. You see, now it is time for change. Now it is time that we must resume that charge. A decade back, you would come to us, decade plus, I think now it is, when the Vivekananda International Foundation had hosted that book launch. And now that book is more relevant than ever. And I would just request you one word, Rajiv, because you are in the United States. There is a Professor Mithi Mukherjee who's written a book, In the Shadow of the Raj. One of the best accounts of British India's shenanigans in this country and what it did to enslave us psychologically, to dominate our historical narratives, to spin doctor our history, and the Raj, the empire has just shifted from this side of the Atlantic to the other side, as you rightly pointed out. You've been leading a valiant fight back in the other side of the new empire, which seems to be tottering a bit with what it has done in Afghanistan and now in Ukraine. So I think we leave that tottering empire to itself, get the battle back to where the key result area is, in the Indian subcontinent, and health permitting, I would request you to now come in first. There is a great amount that can be put across in a face-to-face interaction. Let them see you not just on their screen. Let them dominate you. I would like you to dominate their hearts and minds. We have to fight a battle for the hearts and minds of the Indian population. The ground is ready. It's receptive. In the lingua franca, in the local languages, there is a lot of churn, lot of change, and but like I said, we need to target this time, and I'll try and speak to Dobal Sahib because there is now a need to see that we reach out to the decision, to reach out to those who, they actually are doing it from a lot of, I suppose, a sense of duty, that we can't change history with every change in the government. So they are quite convinced. What is their history? The history I read to pass my IAS, IPS, IRS exam. That is the history, sir. That is our narrative. And every nation has a foundational narrative of state. We outsourced this foundational narrative to the empire, and what is left of it is now coming from where you are, from the United States. No country outsources its history. The Chinese history is not written by the Americans or the British, nor is the Russian, nor is the French history. Why should the history of a cultural, civilizational state, the size of India, the population of India, be outsourced to London and now to Harvard or wherever? So for that, we fought valiantly there. We've taken them on their own intellectual turf, shown them the hollowness of their argument by the Paksha, Purva Paksha approach. Now that approach has to be brought to India to sensitize our bureaucracy, police, civil, military, to the truth. For the truth, Rajiv concerns us all. More power to your pen. I would request you to come out with a second enlarged edition of this, where I would request if you can ask Mithi Mukherjee to add a chapter, historical chapter, to which is a seamless link between between colonized India and post-colonized India. That linkage she has established very well, and that deals with a lot of other things. Take her under your wing, your broad shoulders and your very wide feathers. We would like you to fly to India. Thank you.
General.
Jai Bharat. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you so much for your address. We have a few minutes left. So Rajivji, I wanted to kind of come back to you with a couple of thoughts on your end, maybe as a response to what Madhuji said and what General Bakshiji said. And then we have a couple of minutes for some quick Q&A, and then we'll conclude.
Well, I want to really thank both Madhu and General Bakshi, both very dear friends, both 100% aligned with my life cause, my Swadharma, their Swadharma, same. I'll just make a few comments on each of them, their remarks, and then we'll open it to Q&A. So, Madhu, regarding the large number of hundreds of references in this new book I'm doing, in this new Breaking India 2.0, we are creating a website with all the data, because we expect that some of that data will be wiped out. They'll delete it. They will change their website. So we are downloading all the links, all the information, whether it's video, data, whatever, putting it on a website. So for each EndNote number, there will be a corresponding, you click that number and you will get that data. You don't have to buy a book. You don't have to go anywhere. So we want to turn this into the beginning of a research movement. So many other people benefiting from all this data we've gathered will be able to investigate, like the Panama Papers, created so much research. So we are creating this kind of a thing, a database. Second thing, Breaking India as a textbook, Madhu said, and the same thing General Bakshi said. Of course, I would be delighted. But, it seems self-serving if the author goes and presents this idea. If General Bakshi can do it, I'll be more than happy to support, go around giving lectures in all the academies, wherever they want to have it as a textbook. I think it's a great idea. Madhu's point that I sound pessimistic while she feels there's a large awakening. See, if we were going at 20 miles speed or kilometer speed, and now we are going at 40, of course it's good. But if the enemy is going at 60 or 80, it's not good. So your score is better than before, but we are not up to the other side. The other side is advanced even more. So the reason for my concern is that, as I will show in this new book, the game has changed. Many more people are in it, much money in it, lot of heavy weaponry, and this is why I'm working very hard. And so, General Bakshi, I'm planning on launching the Breaking India 2.0. That's not the title; it's a different title. But that book, which is kind of the earlier book is 12 years old. The movement is 25 years old. So where are things today? That is what this new book will talk about. And I'm planning on launching it in around midsummer. I would love to have you help me do the launch, and we'll go to all the places that you want to go. You should ask people like Ajit Doval to come and launch this, like he was the one who launched it. He stood up and did the talk. I would love to do all that. And my target is something like August. So I'm working like day and night to get this book done. Regarding NCRT, I'm also including that in this book. I'm giving an analysis of the fact that it is quite disgraceful that they have not changed a single line of any textbook, and what the issues are in these textbooks, and how these textbooks are now being used internationally, cited in courts, in court cases, cited in various Congress and Senate and these kind of hearings, that if the Indian government officially is taking a certain stand, how can people like me, individuals like me who don't have any adhikar, any authority, counter it? So the problem is very serious, and I'm very glad, delighted and thankful to both of you. Thank you very much. So Nikunj, back to you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Rajivji. A question for Madhuji. It's actually a two-part question. How do we get the so-called, sort of these, what they call leftist, right? I mean, this word is sort of like abused in many ways, but people who don't realize that they're being used as tools for breaking India forces. How do we impact that? What can we do? And the second part, and this could be a question for you as well as Rajivji, both, but the second part is, how do we make the youth realize this, that, they're being sucked into this anti-Hindu narrative? How do we change that? How do we bring them back? So Madhuji, first, yourself.
With regard to the first, which is how do we make people aware what the leftists are doing? Good research, say of the kind Rajiv has done. And one of my books is also going to be out soon, exploding and blasting their narrative with regard to, let's say, XYZ. You'll know it soon. Or the manner in which, for example, I was able to do it for the Gujarat riots. What a fake narrative that was. In the case of Colonel Purohit, in the case of Maya Kodnani, they gave her a death sentence when she was nowhere near the scene. I nailed it hour by hour, minute by minute. So good research. I'm not saying I'm the only one doing it. I just said the manner in which you can do it is by actually doing far better research, which is not very easy, which is not very difficult than leftists do, because they're full of lies. All you have to do is to be true to facts, to be able to blast them out of existence. They are on very shaky grounds. And the second part, how do we make the young people aware? I think both Rajiv and General Bakshi pointed out that if our course curriculum feeds poison to them, even their parents are helpless. Young people in my own family, extended family, it's becoming difficult to talk. Most families are now becoming warfare zones, intellectual warfare zones, or political warfare zones, because they are being fed, if they're going to elite schools and elite universities, they come back loaded with poison in their heads. And they're taught to believe that their parents or the older generation, if they have any corrective to make, they're all ruddy-fuddies who are conservative, status quo mongers, Hindutva, soldiers or whatever. And the very term Hindu has been actually used so often as a pejorative. It's been demonized so much. So the one, of course, essential part is take them to task. In fact, Rajiv, on a show I had this evening on the Gorakhnath Panth, I had two people talking, knowledgeable people talking about Yogi Adityanath and his connection to the Gorakhnath Peeth. And it's really appalling how they've demonized that sacred institution, which has played such a historic role in defending our civilizational heritage, Dharma, all that. And they made it into a fascist citadel, so to speak. Now, I really felt that the kind of demonization that they have subjected even Yogi Adityanath and Gorakhnath Peeth to, they should be sued for criminal defamation. Some of those who are attached to that mud, I don't think it should be left to Yogi ji to defend himself. It should be done by people who are connected to that Peeth. They are connected to that Panth, Nath Panth. So, इनको कुछ एक selective cases में इनको जेल भिजवाइए इनके झूठों पे, get them punished, sue them with vigor. The manner in which, for example, they are hounding Baba Ramdev, 1,500, nearly 1,500 criminal FIRs. Why? Because he claimed with good reason that coronal kit that he has created is a very effective cure for COVID. I use it. I didn't take vaccination. But he has 1,500 criminal cases in different parts of the country. That's how they hound you. We need to do it for good causes. They're doing it for bad causes. And be proactive in getting them punished for their lies. But you can't do it if the government is against us. Then the judiciary will be against us, because the law depends on the attitude of the government, the stance that the judiciary takes. So very important to put pressure on our government to force them to do course correction, which is very urgently needed. Rajiv has repeatedly emphasized not one comma or full stop changed in 7.5 years in our course books. Not only that, Rajiv, I'm sure you are aware, Delhi University, the Vice Chancellor, who had actually junked the syllabus made by leftists, and he detoxed the BA course curriculum, took out those books which called them Hindu fascists. They punished him. Soon after Modi ji came to power, the first HRD minister he appointed hounded him out of his job and reversed the course back to the course which described BJP and RSS as fascist agents. I mean, what do you do with these people? Padhte nahi hai, likhte nahi hai. I have given them written feedback on some of their research centers, the research that they are funding. They continue funding the same old crap with gusto. So they have to do course correction. They have to be forced to do course correction, or else others will take over. I'm quite hopeful that the next generation of Hindu leaders will not be so dhimmi, because the people are not willing to accept dhimmi leaders anymore. We expect Porush. ये नपुंसक जो कर दिया है हिंदू समाज को, ये नहीं चलेगा. निशस्त्र एक लेवल पे और नपुंसक intellectually, morally नपुंसक, ये नहीं चलेगा. The next generation is likely to be, if we survive, the next generation will be leaders with more guts and more spine.
Yeah, Rajiv, just to follow up on that, actually, what do you think in the Western side of, like, Madhuji talked about a lot of things in India, but what about the United States and Canada? What about like the challenges you've seen, and then the youth? What do you think they can do?
So, my next book is all based on my observations from the United States and India and Europe. So I will wait for that, because it's going to be out very shortly in a few weeks. So I'll pass on that. But I would really like General Bakshi to have some questions for General Bakshi, because his involvement with this Breaking India book starts from day one. He was there and part of the launch at Vivekanand Center with Ajit Doval leading the charge. And I really think that he's played an enormous role. And General Bakshi, I want you to know that I've seen you on TV so many times for so many years, really pushing this narrative forward. And this was very encouraging for me. And your suggestion that I should come back, I certainly would like to do that and work with you on that and see what we can do together. So I think you should, Nikunj, ask General Bakshi more his remarks and comments, because he has a very interesting perspective on breaking India.
Absolutely. General Bakshi, if you would like to add to that, one of the questions that has what is your take, and you covered this, what is your assessment of how the Indian government actually has failed or not done its job in terms of correcting the narrative, which you talked about, but what can be done? What can be done going from, of course, Rajiv ji is there, but I think intellectual Kshatriyas or homegrown talent locally has to be also there, right? So you are on mute, so please unmute.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can
yes.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
I thank you. Rajiv ji, one of the things that I analyzed, 7 years, very, very staunchly pro-Hindu government has been in power. And why is it that they haven't been able to change a single line in the textbooks, in the curricula? And after much analysis, and I shouldn't be really saying it on a public platform, I'm sorry, but the talent, intellectual talent waste that we have in the present government is I would say, bluntly and straightforward, a bit mediocre. Yeah, there are just a very high intellectual stature. And then there is the effect of that. It is a highly centralized government. And how much can one man do? The man is energetic, he's doing hell of a lot. But how much can Modi ji do by himself? And what I discovered to my horror was that it was what the bureaucrat said. That's what happened. I met ministers a number of times. The number of times I've met the ministers and gotten from them very firm assent. Yes, yes. Hanji, Bakshi ji, done this thing, that thing. And invariably he picked up the phone or his secretary and said, "Main Bakshi ji ko bhej raha hu." And there I got a totally different response. And the bureaucracy, if it doesn't want to do something, I mean, they are past masters at doing nothing. Some of them are very good. I mean, I shouldn't be uncharitable and paint everybody with the same brush, because I'm finding now the new people that I'm encountering. In fact, the culture ministry was very keen to take on some of what he was, the present cultural ministry bureaucrat. And but what I found was that what he was doing came from a sense of, let me do the right thing. He actually thought he was doing good by the country, by the people of India, by not being swayed by the whims and fancies, as some of them perceived it, of the latest set of people in power. One of my bureaucrat colleagues told me, कि बख्शी जी ये तो किराएदार है, हम मकान मालिक and now I realize he is damn deadpan right. I mean, that is the reality. Unless the bureaucracy is with you, let me tell you, Rajiv, you will be able to do very little. How much can the top man do by himself? He and the PMO are very powerful. Once it gets there, most of the, 99% it gets done. But the point is, there is that one set of people, how much can they do? Centralization is very good, we needed it, but over-centralization, as we are taught in management at the apex level, can have its set of problems. So what you have to target very specifically is the decision maker. We want to see the change happening on the ground. it's good to create that ground pressure, the groundswell. That's good. That's good. It must happen concurrently, keep happening. But at a point in time, if you want that change, the IPS bureaucracy, the IAS bureaucracy, the IFS bureaucracy, the military bureaucracy, they all have to be on board. And like I said, he's doing it so I want to do the right.
Your video is getting cut. The audio is getting cut off,
And
unfortunately.
when I etc. Well, my textbook was, and so sorry. 1 second. Yeah, I think I'll just hold it in my hand. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think it was just your internet connection. The audio is fine now. Yes.
All right. So as I was saying, that we will have to target the key decision makers, the key enablers. If they are convinced, they will do it. Right now, he is convinced that he is doing the right thing by God and his country by trying to stick to the truth. That is what he has to be told, sir. The truth has to be based on empirical facts and not on the fact that it was said by Macaulay, Max Muller. They are not the last word because, sir, between then and now, the amount of information, the amount of data, the amount of facts that have been added call for a paradigm shift. You see, even in quantum mechanics, there had to be the Copenhagen Convention where they all got together to decide, okay, we've got this mass of data from electromagnetism and electricity and light and photons and what have you. So now, Niels Bohr and Schrodinger and Einstein had all to get together for a paradigm shift in physics. Sir, we need a paradigm shift in social sciences in India. Long overdue. I have met many of the so-called right-wing historians and this thing, but once again, with
I think your audio is cutting off, Bakshiji.
May I come in for a minute?
Yes, Madhuji. I would say we'll come back to.
Mediocre. And that is why Vivekananda International Foundation. Sorry.
No, your video was your audio was getting cut off because of the internet connection. So we keep losing you.
Sorry. Yes, I have a bad internet connection. That's why I'm so much more keen on face-to-face. The simple fact is that
it's still like that, unfortunately.
There needs to be a paradigm shift in social sciences area. Because the accumulation of facts has been so much post-independence that somebody has to now sit down and stitch it to apron strings beyond the colonial narratives and effect a true paradigm shift. And for that paradigm shift to be lasting, it has to get into our course curricula. Like Rajiv ji was very rightly saying that he had also challenged Romila Thapar to a debate. We've been challenging these people to come and debate with us. I said, come to JNU, that's home turf. But have an intellectual debate. I have also earned a PhD, just by the way. So I think academically I'm qualified and I thank God I got that PhD. Well, otherwise I would have been dismissed out of hand as an unlettered ignoramus Fauji. You see, but with the PhD degree from the University of Madras, they cannot do it. They refuse to come and discuss and debate. That, sir, is the problem. Because they know they are on shaky ground academically. They know they are on shaky ground factually. And I think Rajiv did a damn good thing. When Romila Thapar didn't accept his challenge for a debate, he took out the arguments that she had and on an open forum but refuted them one by one in the classical, Paksha, debate format, and that I thought did a lot, because otherwise you hear this lady talking in JNU to a very supportive audience, and the infra dig she takes at the so-called right-wing approach to history, and the way people giggle, sniggle, and laugh. I think that needs to be now changed, because you are not on factual grounds. You are not factoring in, she said history must be ready to be changed. Why aren't you changing it when you factor much? Because you are saying what the British, what the white man said was the last word. How can you brown ass people hope to change this narrative? You will not be allowed to. You go back to Oxford, young lady. Go back. Because we cannot accept a situation where our history is dictated by either Oxford or
General Bakshi.
So Bakshi ji, I think, thank you for the comment. I think because we're running out of time, I would like Madhuji to have some final words.
Capable of understanding, writing, a period desire to. Right, I will call it a halt here. I will call it a halt. I just get impassioned because the topic is so close to my heart. But I wish you all the best. I thank Rajiv ji from the bottom of my heart for inviting me to this session. We hope to have many more. But above all, Rajiv, we want to see you here. You are needed.
Yes.
You are
I
needed.
will come. I will come.
Thank you.
Promise. My promise, I will come. And I'll be in touch with you privately, offline. I'll be in touch with you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Madhuji,
so-
your final words?
Yeah, my final this thing, while I appreciate and I'm in empathy with the passion of General Bakshi in wanting, we will not accept this, we will not accept that, we must do that. But the fact is our government is against us. And it's not out of a fit of absent-mindedness. It's a political decision taken by the current dispensation that they wish to target all their energy towards a development agenda. Some of it is very admirable. Clean water tap in every home in the remotest village, latrines, free rations, though I think I'm sick and tired of those subsidies. You're turning a whole nation into beggary. Large percentage of your population, you are directing subsidies at or freebies at. But this decision not to change the curriculum has come right from the top. Any HRD minister will tell you that they were directed. And for example, the one who came after Smriti Irani, Javadekar ji, he said it very clearly that he was told not to rock the boat, to not create any controversies. If you're so petrified of controversies, then obviously you cannot change. But it's not just the NCERT. It's not just the BA and the MA curriculum. Now, mind you, even at the academy for training bureaucrats, the civil servants, what are they studying? What is their curriculum? Who are the people who go and lecture them? They are forced to, if you have to apply for IAS or UPSC exam, they know it for a fact. They have to read XYZ newspaper, mostly those that are professional Hindu bashers. You have to be well versed in the crap that Ramila Thapar, Irfan Habib, and the entire cabal has been peddling. You will not clear the paper otherwise. You say one word of criticism against that worldview, you won't qualify. So they are well trained into Hindu bashing, India bashing. That's the bureaucracy we have. Very few have escaped that indoctrination, and those few are the ones who do not come from the social science background, who come from the IITs and the IIMs, where at one time this was not included. Now they have actually invaded the IITs also by setting up departments of humanities, and they are teaching the same crap. They have actually subverted the IITs, which were producing at one time very fine brains, very patriotic brains. You get the same kind of crap coming from IITs now, from IIMs now. The point that I'm trying to make is that if your bureaucrats are trained, if your Faujis are trained, where do Faujis go for their orientation courses? To JNU. What is the faculty that comes to introduce social science and sociology and to introduce them to social issues? Is the JNU leftist commie mafia that comes to teach them what interpretation to give to minority rights, women's rights, this, that. So the Breaking India forces are in command everywhere. They are gatekeepers. So for Modi ji to trust the same bureaucracy to help him refurnish the system, reorient it, to detox it, is unrealistic. And he probably doesn't want it. Otherwise, he would choose a very different set of people. If he can have lateral entries coming for economic affairs, I see no reason why he could not have shortlisted the best brains, people with a track record, 100 of them, and said, get to work. And within 1 year, we want from nursery to the end, a vision of which direction this change needs to be. And also change the training of the IS. Let's not forget, people like Harsh Mandar were directors, and it's that same mafia that controls even what kind of training your cops get, what kind of training your civil servants get. If we don't address this problem seriously, and this government does not seem to be in a mood to do so, at least not yet. They've made very feeble attempts to do so. And it must start with fixing the training of our civil servants, Rajiv, because they have to take policy. If you don't start inducting the right kind of people, if you induct, recently there have been a lot of exposes of the kind of teaching shops. You did a brilliant video on this, on what the academies are teaching IS aspirants. There have been similar exposes in recent weeks. But why they're teaching that? We are picking faults with these academies, these teaching shops. But they're teaching this because that's what's required to pass the exam. So I would say even NCERT books can wait. You have to fix the civil service exams. What they've done there, they've allowed UPSC Jihad to go unchecked. They've allowed sabotage, internal sabotage of all those institutions, and including the judiciary. That needs to be fixed first. So it actually, if you ask me, Rajiv, it has to be top down. Right. Because, it'll take too many long years. By the time these school kids grow up and they have got new, but they will be jobless because the gatekeepers for these jobs are still the same old demonic forces. So it has to be bottom down. And it must start with fixing the recruitment of our civil servants, police, even the army. This dead weight of secularism that even our forge has to carry will never let them do their job with the fierce integrity that's really needed to combat the Break Up India forces within and without. So that needs to be done with speed and determination. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you, Rajiv ji, Dr. Madhukeshwar, and General G.D. Bakshi, for joining us today. This has been a wonderful panel. We can go on for the next several hours, but time is short, and I know it's late in India as well. So I really appreciate you joining us, even though it's so late in Bharat. And wishing you all the best with all the hard work that you do, and keep inspiring us as young generations to continue to preserve and protect Dharma, and set the right narrative as far as our culture and our civilization is concerned. So with that, I would like to welcome the next panel.
Thank you.
Yes, namaskar.
Namaskar.
So I would like to introduce our next panel, but first I would like to introduce the moderator. We talked about breaking India forces and in terms of the battle of civilizations, but how is this idea of fragmentation, the Western discourse in India's fragments, how is that really created? So this panel is going to talk about some of that. So let me introduce our moderator, Diya Nagaraja. Diya is a computer engineer and a postgraduate in management who joined Infinity Foundation as a researcher and the host of the Youth Asks series featured on the Rajiv Malhotra YouTube channel. As a fellow at Infinity Foundation, she oversees social media activities, manages a team of 20 plus youth volunteers, develops educational materials and other projects for Infinity Foundation that includes the dissemination of the foundation's original research activities. She also contributes articles to the Intellectual Kshatriya portal and other research projects. Welcome, Diya, and please introduce the panelists. I believe first is Dr. Seshagiri. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Nikunj. Namaste. Today I have with me two erudite panelists, Dr. Sarita Seshagiri and Ms. Richa Gautam, to discuss chapter 11 of the book Breaking India, Western Discourse on India's Fragments. Breaking India exposed the international nexus that is relentlessly working towards dividing India into various incoherent fragments. This nexus includes a paradoxical mixture of academics and activists lifted across continents to give testimonies against India. The book clearly explains how the Western institutions shape the discourse on India in the social sciences and humanities. We also learn how Western governments, funding agencies, academy, media, churches, all of them come together with a single mission to influence Indian intellectuals in academy, media, and NGOs. The book also explains how India has been systematically deconstructed through the secular and biblical lens in many academic and think tank projects in the West. Secular lens includes feminism, history, anthropology, and so on. And while the biblical lens includes Abrahamic categories and missionaries' agenda. And here's a relevant quote from the book. If one scrutinizes the proceedings and abstracts of the last 35 years of annual conferences on South Asia held at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, one will see that the overall portrayal of India is as an anti-progressive country, frozen in time and poverty-stricken. India appears like a patient afflicted with caste, sati, dowry, feticide, untouchability, etc., with the West as the doctor. To support colonialism, a genre of literature was developed in the West that became known as atrocity literature. And this literature justified colonialism by portraying other cultures as primitive or dangerous and requires Western intervention in order to save themselves or advance as a civilization. In the case of India, this sort of literature was extensively used to justify their intervention in cases of human rights and to identify or amplify the fault lines of Indian civilization. For instance, India has been viewed at the extreme scale of, at the extreme end of the exotic scale that's filled with polytheism, filled with images of polytheism, weird gods, caste system, human rights atrocities, grotesque aesthetics, irrational thinking, and an overall image of chaos. And this image correlates in the Judeo-Christian mind with evil or lack of civilization. And I'll just quote another profound quote from the book that's highly relevant today. Starting in the early 1800s, European and American Christian missionaries depicted the people of India as savages who were in need of being saved from darkness. Similar ideas in more recent times about India also feed into images of Indian culture being inferior to the West in dealing with the human condition. The British claimed to be colonizing India to improve its human rights, the so-called civilizing mission. This created a trend among Indian leaders to go to the British with complaints against one another, and they were encouraged to blame Indian culture as the cause of their problems. The same kind of civilizing role is presently being played by America. And the recent Dismantling Global Hindutva conference further substantiates this fact that was warned by Rajiv ji a decade ago. And this has remained the framework for Western intervention even today. However, the methods of intervention and discourse keeps changing to current times. For example, during the recent pandemic, we saw how the Western discourse ridiculed Ayurvedic practices and treatment. So our two panelists today will delve into different aspects of how atrocity literature is created via selective data, conferences, and events to showcase India and Hinduism as patients afflicted with all sorts of problems. This also generates Hinduphobia, along with calls for dismantling an entire religion or civilization. Dr. Sarita Seshagiri holds a doctorate in political science from the National University of Singapore, a master's in political science from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and a bachelor's in history from Lady Shri Ram College, New Delhi. After her doctorate, she joined some of the leading multinationals in mobile technology as a user experience researcher in their research divisions. She has been a visiting faculty at the International Institute of Information Technology, Bengaluru. She has held several workshops on research methods and qualitative field immersion in institutes such as National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati and Mumbai, Maharashtra Institute of Technology in Pune, International Institute of Information Technology, to name a few. Dr. Seshagiri has presented papers in leading conferences on human-computer interaction, user behavior, and social technology. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Sarita ji. Over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. So thank you for having me over and sharing my experiences with you. So today I'm going to share my field immersive experiences, especially qualitative study, and also how it is analyzed and disseminated. So when was the last that you heard of research of, for, and by the people of India being studied? My stance is that we Indians must reclaim research studies that are done on us and are bound to impact us for a long, long time. So what I call for is reclaiming research ethics and the credibility of qualitative research, especially in the non-Western, that is the Indian context, because we have had borrowed socio-cultural concepts, theoretical constructs, and all of this has characterized scholarship on India, both in the past, and it guides our frame of reference even today. And what can we expect from all of that? Well, skewed research outcomes, as you rightly pointed out to begin with. And just to quickly take a step back and see how qualitative research came about in India, the study of Indian social structure, culture, polity, religion, economy, all of it owes its roots to deep ethnographic traditions, which began sometime in the beginning of the 20th century, and most of it was seeped in qualitative field immersions. So what happened is there was a strong emphasis during this time to collect data in terms of race and physical anthropology. So the census data that was collected during this time became synonymous with caste data. And the British officials largely drew their treatises on caste, India's caste system and so forth from this data. And most of the qualitative field immersions were in the tribal zones of Northeast India, Central India, Southern India. And most of these studies were initially undertaken by ethnographers who were commissioned by the British government, British Indian government. And that later paved the way for ethnographers, but with a definite missionary purpose. So by the 20th century, mid-20th century, qualitative research in India kind of crystallized to two kinds of institutionalized ideas, which was caste and village. So if you look at the works of major anthropologists and sociologists in India during that time, you will find this preoccupation with caste, and that continues even today. So you would think that newer perceptions have since then developed in India, especially among our researchers. But instead, they still keep borrowing the old paradigms, and it lacks an India-specific framework. Whatever socio-ethno styles of inquiry that they are undertaking in India, it still lacks an India-specific framework. And this is especially problematic if you consider the fact that researchers of qualitative studies are also known as research instruments. What they say, what they do, how they present data itself is completely influenced by researchers who are research instruments. So take the example of how these borrowed constructs get translated to published works. To put it in a nutshell, there was a study that was done on women's empowerment in India sometime like about 5-6 years ago. And the statement was that women in rural India are empowered so long as they can address their husbands by their first name. So that's the kind of scholarship it totally gets reduced to if you keep on following this kind of theoretical constructs completely borrowed from the West, be it empowerment, be it about feminism and so forth. So anyway, to quickly go back to my field immersive experiences on projects that were funded by well-known donors, and also how ethics got compromised due to biases and due to adherences to the dominant theoretical constructs. So the teams that I have been involved in off and on in the past so many years are teams which are like multicultural. So we have, I've had colleagues and fellow researchers who hold both within and outside India, who hold academic positions, and have held it for several years and have contributed to several years of specific theoretical constructs such as subversion around gender, caste, power, religion, identities, rights, privacy, majoritarian politics, and so forth. So basically, they are adherents to these paradigms and approaches, which are all borrowed from classic Western literature, which was popularized by the likes of Gramsci, Foucault, Louis Dumont, and recently by people like Gail Omvedt, André Bethé, and their Western-educated Indian counterparts. So most of their academic arrangements has been in pursuit of published works and field studies which further these constructs. And that's one thing. The other thing is most of their field immersions, because they are undertaken several field immersions for these hypothetical constructs, they had already got familiar with the target groups that they needed to go and interact with. So consequently, they knew exactly how to manipulate the people and the kind of questions that they would be asking. So the presence of both of these factors sort of increase the risk of data selection, skewed data selection, or cherry picking, which only led to further corroboration of the hypothesis. Also, what I noticed is confirmation bias. In most of these studies that I've been involved in, within the first a week or two of seeing a few data points, a few interviews from users, the transcripts that come out, within a few couple of, let's just say 5 or 6 user transcripts, we call it users, participants, interviewees, interchangeably, basically they mean the same. So from seeing a few of them, they start developing certain mindsets that this is how the rest of the study is going to be. So although there's a goal of say 150 open-ended guided interviews, but the tendency of the research team would be to form their own conclusions from the screening of the first few user manuscripts. And for that, they seek further corroboration. And these conclusions that they seek are also drawn from preconceived constructs, as I mentioned earlier. So for instance, in one of these studies, many of the respondents were from lower economic categories. All right. And the project was, the research goal was really to see how they overcome their vulnerabilities, how they gain agency. So in the first study session that we did, the first phase of the study, most of the respondents had said that they did not consider caste as a hindrance to negotiate their living or earning a livelihood, as much as lack of access to economically well-off individuals or people in their social network. But the researchers had been so blinded to their subservience to caste theories that they drew only upon those incidents that the respondents had spoken of, which they felt was relevant to the furthering of the caste theory. So they just threw out the larger part of the responses, which was talking about social networks and having lack of access to economically well-off people. And the other thing is convenience samples. Convenience sample is where researchers can get easy access, quick access to people, to respondents. So it could be your railway station, bus terminus, bazaars, markets, and so forth. Now, what they would do is, so for instance, if they need to pick out people from the lower economic category, say the blue collar workers or below poverty line, even there, what they would do is they would seek out only people from specific religious and ethnic communities and start asking questions. So their findings obviously would be skewed to the exclusion of those groups and those communities who they did not include in their samples. The other real test of ethics is when field data contradicts scholars' accepted beliefs. And there's an instance that comes really clearly to my mind where my fellow researcher was European, and he had recently completed his master's thesis with a field immersion in a neighboring country of India's, whose foreign policy has been based on hostile posturing towards India. Anyway, so he was looking at that point to combine his doctoral research questions with that of the funded study. And need I mention that his research question was deeply tied to issues of religious subversion and identities. So that was the other thing. And in fact, with that in mind, he had got into a conversation with the participants, one of them that comes to my mind, where she belonged to a certain demographic background. And he asked her if she had participated in a campaign against the government in her state. And then when she answered in the negative, he asked her if she would have joined if the religious head of a community had come on mass media and social media and asked her to participate, to which again she responded in the negative. Then he sort of brought in the hypothetical value-laden sort of questions, where he started asking, how will you feel if you're threatened by members of the majority religion in the future? So I was witness to all of this, and I asked my colleague the reason for his constant persistence to obtain an affirmative response from the respondent. And his answer was that he was trying to tease out the problem from the perspective of an outsider. You know, the emic sort of issues that you have in sociology and socio-anthropological studies as an insider and as an outsider. So he was saying he was trying to get responses from her as an outsider, and basically pushing sensitivity, forget ethics, even pushing sensitivity away from this whole process of interviewing by asking dubious supplementary questions from the so-called indomitable stance of an outsider. And so basically what is happening is qualitative studies end up getting analyzed phenomenologically. So it is primarily dependent on the hermeneutics or the reference frames of the researchers, the junior researchers, the field interpreters, the language translators, and the senior researchers, and finally the donors, last but not the least. So there's something like a cumulative and a cascading effect of interpretive descriptions at every stage of such qualitative studies. In fact, speaking of donor mandates, there's another instance I want to share with you where the donor representative sort of took me aside, and he said, while you and your team will be undertaking this in India, so we have done parts in Asia and Africa, and so we got communitarian tension. That's what he told me. He said, we have done parts of Asia and Africa, and we got communitarian tension. Now you need to bring us religious, economic, and caste tension. And you will get that if you look at the locations in northern India. So I was like, we just bring in like that. He said, yes, you bundle it up with, identity, politics sort of thing. And, we are all set, we are good to go. So what happens is donors and senior academics, especially in a funded study, they place the proverbial cart before the horse with their predetermined conclusions and hypothetical constructs. And these are basically, what are these constructs I'm talking about? Essentially, these are constructs of a conflict-ridden, polarized society that is completely thrust onto the India sample. So if you it's not just funded studies. If we step out from the context of funded projects and consider the circumstances that surround academia, and these are not instances that are limited to case studies alone. In fact, it resonates in ideologies that are promoted in various academic departments, especially, yes, humanities. And even within humanities, specific departments like gender studies, culture, ethnic studies, philosophy, and so forth. So their ideological positions have championed divided groups and divisive interests, right from post-industrialization, modernism, Marxism, postmodernism. In fact, if you consider postmodernism the postmodernist thought, it really is in terms of divisive interests and power dynamics. So you have the oppressed, you have the oppressor. Think about it. There's the state that is pitted against civil society or democracy, individual rights and freedom that is pitted against the Leviathan state. Then you have public resources versus private realm. And yes, upper caste versus lower caste too. So if you consider going one step ahead, deeper actually into what happens in academia, as Dr. Kishwar ji said, and even Rajiv ji had mentioned earlier, if you consider the manner in which academic papers in especially social studies are published, that's a whole industry of chicanery. Authors will first write papers that will fulfill the agenda of the forum where they want the paper to be published. So even after this, there's something called the review process, following which the papers are further reviewed, revised, or sometimes even rewritten. And all this is again according to the guidelines of the agenda of that forum. There's a whole agenda out there. And even in that, there are certain rules to follow. You cannot mock social justice. You cannot, it's all right to mock who the academic camp has sort of labeled as privileged. So in the Indian context, you can be casteist as long as you mock the upper caste. You can be fundamentalist as long as you can mock Hindus and Hinduism. And woe betide if you were to do the same for the lower caste and the so-called minorities, is just going to go on a complete backlash for you. So basically, research hypotheses are thus constructed, and scholarship is built to fit into these paradigms of competitive victimhood. So academic research and published studies are then seen as champions of whoever they have classified as weak and oppressed, and they gain traction, especially in societies which are already ridden with power dynamics. So in short, to put whatever I have said concisely, there are studies that are undertaken on the basis of dominant Western-centric sort of theoretical paradigms, and these are paradigms of conflict and polarization. Then there are studies published from these studies. There are publications that come out which gain academic endorsement, approval, and they shape global public opinion. They become part of culture, and then sooner or later they start determining our administrative policy and even foreign policies towards India. So as a first step, if we are reconstructing our fragments, we are picking up from what has been blasted, we need to understand this nexus and how urgent it is for us to reclaim our civilizational value and dignity. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarita ji, for that insightful session. We have a few questions for you. Dalit studies and atrocity literature. How is the data being gathered and versus when compared to the ground reality?
Right. So if we are looking at caste scholars and how they have been putting forth data, there is two ways in which they do that. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Please.
Yeah, okay. So there is two ways in which they do that. First is the soft data, and the other one is the hard data. So if you look at the soft data, then you have documents and reports of untouchability practices, land ownership, remuneration of labor, access to education, access to specific resources or lack of access to specific resources like health, or wells, the water, the wells, then temples and so forth. So any action here is attributed to acts of caste violence and crimes. And then there's the hard data, which the caste scholars resort to by picking from statistics and numbers that come from the NCRB, which is the National Crimes Records Bureau. So where they pick up this data, which is really to put forth this whole narrative to show that lower castes are frequently, they are the ones who encounter caste violence, that it is on a rise, it's of high brutality, that these acts of violence is committed by members of the upper caste. So in an attempt to retain, the traditional hierarchy of caste system and so forth. Now, if you look deeply, dig a little deeper into all this, there's a problem. So the first thing is they themselves, the caste scholars themselves, do not generate hard data to prove a point. They depend on NCRB reports. The second thing is NCRB, just to look at what sort of data they have. So if you take up the timeline of 2011, and all these are cited sources, you can go back to it and take a look at it. So there were 62 lakhs of cognizable crime that was committed in the year 2011. And from this, the reported crimes against scheduled castes was considered, was written as 0.53% of the total crimes that were committed in 2011. So, and scheduled castes themselves, if you look at the census data of that time, they constituted about 17% of the population, 16 point something to 17% of the population. And so they basically were facing this 16.6, 17% of the population were facing 0.53% of the total criminal incidents in India. That meant that actually meant 85, 83, 84% of the population was facing more than 90% of the rest of the criminal cases. The other thing is the NCRB data, which is made public, is actually based on FIRs, that is the first information report. And they register it as FIR based on what the victim has told or any representative of the victim. And when they take down that information, and after that, what is made public, they do not actually give out the caste of the person who is perpetrating the crime against the scheduled caste. Okay, there is, even if the crime is recorded under the IPC, the caste of the perpetrator is either not known or not considered, or even if it is known and noted, it's not made part of the chunk that is made available to the public. So that's the whole thing. The whole majority of crime against scheduled castes is where the perpetrator could well be a member of the lower caste itself. And then the other strategy is where they puff up figures. I'm talking about people who come up with hard data, let alone soft data, which is run into lots of problems. The hard data is where they say that the crimes and the acts of violence are on the rise. Many of these studies, they come up with figures that speak in terms of absolute numbers. So these are absolute figures without any comparable data. So it is not compared to the rest of the criminal cases that have also increased in that time frame. So there is no comparable data by which to say that crimes against scheduled caste alone has increased and is more than the rest of the population. Like I gave the example of And then you have the soft data, which is, again, how they go about with cherry picking, as I said, if you're talking about caste. So I'll just give you an example. Soft data is where they will, like I said, these are all made into studies of fact-finding sort of a mission. So they will go and ask, have you faced caste atrocity or have you faced caste discrimination? Now, that's a very value-laden term. How do you operationalize it in the field? How do you make it deconstructed such that the respondent can, grapple with it? So they start asking leading questions at that point. And then it so came that I was in a position where I had to find out if there was a caste, discrimination. So I asked this gentleman who was one of the village elders, I said, are people allowed from a different caste? Are people allowed to draw water from the well? So this was in Karnataka. The gentleman responded, he said, we are all Kurubas. All right, we are all Kurubas. But I can see that you are, you don't belong to our community, you don't belong to our jati, but you too will not be allowed to take water from our well. You are, we are Kurubas, but you are not, meaning that I don't, that I'm from a different, jati, but I will not be allowed to take water from the Kuruba well. I said, so how does that work? So he said, now people know you, now they have seen me talking to you, you have interacted with the village elders, so now you will have access to the well. So can you imagine if this sort of this is an anecdotal incident, but these sorts of anecdotal incidents are put together to say that there is caste discrimination, that the Brahmins do not allow people from other community to take water from the well, or people from the upper caste. We are talking about Kurubas here. Even they are very, very protective of who they can trust. So it's an issue of trust. It's an issue of who they consider as part of their closed circle. It's not about varna, jati, especially how they have called it as caste discrimination. It's all a question of trust. So you see where I'm coming from. This is how data gets completely bungled up, messed up, and is made popular in academic literature.
Right. And we have another question. How are these crimes in India compared to crimes in any other country, such as the USA, on a per capita basis?
Oh, I will need to look that up further, but basically, they do not release the entire. If you're looking at, if you're looking at the caste scholars' published works to give you any indication of the kind of crime that is reported or the statistical evidence that is given, then that's the wrong path to follow. More likely, you will get more information from the police departments and the justice departments, logs, both in India and rest of the country. And then, there might be some way of kind of comparing it with US or maybe other countries. But right now, published data from the caste literature is a bad idea. And somebody needs to actually look at the data that's out there with the police department, with the under the IPC codes that has been made into a compendium, and sort of release that to sort of disabuse people into the actual fact of the matter. That still needs to be done.
Right. There's another question. Are there any books or resources for understanding the biases in such socio-cultural field surveys?
Right. Field immersion per se, qualitative field studies, there is a lot of books out there that talks about how to conduct a proper field study, not to ask value-laden questions, not to ask hypothetical questions. But unfortunately, there is no book that says how not to ask questions, which is sort of which sort of builds up on the caste atrocity literature. It's not there. There is no published work that says this is how you should not ask questions about caste and identity. So end of the day, everyone is kind of walking without any understanding of how to gather this sort of sensitive data, or they know exactly how to pick up on the on the cherry picking line that everyone else before them has gone. So if you look at the kind of stuff that M.N. Srinivas, or now I'm not deriding anyone for their scholarship, which is really great. They've done good work. But the whole thing is, when there is no hard evidence to sort of negate what they hold as very, very precious, then they start putting forth data as their own personal experiences, like what I mentioned about phenomenological phenomenological methods, which is what qualitative studies have kind of got reduced to. It's all about the experience of having been discriminated. What sort of discrimination does not matter, as long as it's put together as, like I told you, the oppressed and the oppressor, which is acceptable by the academic community. So as long as they put that in as gender oppression, as caste oppression, anything goes. Nobody is questioning the ethics of questioning. That is the sad part.
Thank you, Saritaji, for that insightful session. And moving over to our next panelist, Ms. Richa Gautam. Ms. Richa Gautam is a research analyst and data scientist by profession. She also volunteers and is on the board of several nonprofit organizations. She is an active member of the steering committee at Coalition of Hindus of North America and will present an analysis on the Dismantling Global Hindutva conference held around 9/11/21. Richa writes for several publications and also anchors various events. Welcome, Richa ji. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Divya ji, and I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, it's a miracle because I just have been through, a power cut, and then I'm, at a neighbor's house, and just hoping we can do this properly. Nikunj, will you be sharing the deck
Yes,
to make
I
sure
can.
I have low bandwidth here? Okay.
Let me share my screen.
Thank you so much. And I just want to quickly say that this is a great segue from what Saritaji just said, because the Dismantling Global Hindutva conference, actually, it basically looks at very similar issues of, caste and, atrocities, sort of building up on atrocity literature on India, and, creating those same tropes of caste and, anti-women, anti-Dalit, all of the tropes that are trying to be hurled via data are also being hurled at India and Hindu, and here as we are studying Hindutva, to create an image of the entire population there, and also towards Hindutva and Hindu. So if we look at the conference Dismantling Global Hindutva, it really spurred people to at least counter some of that narrative that started to build up. There were a million emails that went out to the universities.
Richa ji, if I may interrupt,
is supposed to be an academic endeavor.
Yeah, yes. If I may interrupt, I'm going to turn you. If you want to turn your video off, the feed will be better. So because the screen already has your presentation, so yeah.
Absolutely. Hopefully it's better now.
Yes.
Okay. So what we did was, because the university logos came down from the website, and the universities actually said that we are not supporting this conference, right? So, but at the same time, we found that there was a lot of academic support, a lot of, professors and people from the academia were participating, and none of our pleas to, to counter this was heard. And of course, we were not against the conference, but we were against the idea of just the way this was being propagated as an academic exercise. So we did a sentiment analysis. CoHNA conducted, and commissioned a text analysis company to conduct a sentiment analysis. Nikunji, in the next slide, we have a lot more detail on exactly what a text analysis is. So using the intersectional fields of computer science, artificial intelligence, and linguistics, there is a process to create a sentiment analysis and look at a body of text and classify it as positive, negative, or neutral. And that is what the NLP algorithm does, the natural language processing algorithm. That's what it does once you tell it exactly what the entities mean. So for example, I will tell it that BJP actually means a political party, and say Hindu is a religion, and it'll basically learn and start to parse the data accordingly, right? So we had more than 400 pages of data. We had a lakh words, more than 100,000 words, and more than 1,500 rows of text. So that is what the software analyzed. It is not humanly possible to analyze everything and all of the entities and words and themes inside this 3-day conference. In the next slide, you will see that there were 3 claims that dismantling Hindutva They said it's an academic endeavor, there's just a theoretical exercise. And they also said that Hindutva and Hinduism are 2 different things, so they are not attacking Hinduism, which is something that we were countering, that an attack like this is definitely going to tarnish image of Hinduism in a country which really does not know the difference between these terminologies. And we also found that the dismantling Hindutva team did not actually give any credence to the word Hinduphobia. As you can see, one of their conference topics was Islamophobia and Hindutva. So obviously they recognize Islamophobia, but they refused to give any credence to Hinduphobia. But in the next slide, I think the whole analysis sort of starts to take shape. And what we did was we put together, like I said, all of the data of the 3 days, all of this text, and the software gave us an understanding as to what are the key topics that were discussed in the conference, right? Because we were continuously saying that this is not an academic exercise as much as it is a political meeting. And I think what is satisfying here is that the software obviously gives out exactly the same data, that a lot of politics was discussed in this meeting. 43% of the data and the text or the conversation there was political. Caste was the very next topic, and 11% of it was caste. Academics, women's issues, which were again negatively discussed, but that was, a little bit lower on the scale. And then Hindu customs and culture and some of Ayurvedic practices, those were next in line. And then you have this big bucket of others, which basically includes, some of the welcome notes, introductory notes, all of that, which actually I took out in the next slide. I removed the others component, which created a lot of chatter. And so that really gives us an understanding of actually how much politics was actually discussed in this. So politics dominated the entire conversation. Caste was the next topic. And when you take out the chatter of others, you find that the next topic was caste. And so 80% of the discussion, 18% is caste. So 80% of the discussion was around caste and politics. Next slide.
Richard, you're getting cut off. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
I
Please
can
go
hear
ahead.
you very well.
Yes, go ahead, please. I think we lost you again. Okay, we'll give it another few seconds. I think we may have lost Richaji. I think she had a power outage in her area in India. So we apologize for that. What we will do is we will probably do this presentation tomorrow because it's a really important presentation, I think. So let's stop the sharing. I'm going to stop the sharing for a second. Divya, you want to come back and just kind of conclude? So Richaji, what we will do is, I think there were some technical difficulties with your audio.
Are we there?
Yeah, so what I would say is we're going to do this presentation tomorrow because it's cutting in and out. I think you're cutting in and out. It's dropping the flow of the presentation. So we'll come back and do the presentations. We apologize for the technical difficulties for everybody. But yeah, so let me, so Divya, you want to come back? Sorry.
Yeah, no issues. Yes, I think Richaji can continue her presentation for tomorrow. And we thank Dr. Saritaji for joining us and giving us a very informative session. And we look forward to Richaji's presentation tomorrow.
Wonderful, thank you.
It'll be better.
So we concluded day one with a few themes here, with some discussions around the broad themes around breaking India. What are some of the trends that we have been seeing? What are the forces that we have been encountering, the different types of players? What are some of the challenges ahead of us as a community is concerned? Tomorrow's session, we will continue with Richaji's presentation on how the data is constructed during the dismantling global Hindutva, how certain types of anti-Hindu sentiments were created. There is some very good data. We will also have a presentation or a panel on academic Hinduphobia, its manifestations and impact, as well as a multi-perspective panel on caste and the sort of the creation of fault lines or the exploitation of fault lines that Breaking India talks about in the book. So stay tuned tomorrow. We will see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And hopefully you all can get some good rest. For those who want to get some videos and how this is going to be published, we will be editing the videos and we will be publishing them as over the next few days once the conference is over. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and we will see you tomorrow. Namaste.
Thank you all. Namaste.